Okay, we're live. Hey, everyone. So this is our third installment of the Liberty Hunters podcast. And today we're going to be dealing with the topic of the fact that, hey, guess what? We live in the age of information, folks. And, you know, not only does that have the pretense so that all of us can understand properly the fundamentals and the principles of what it is to be a free human being, but we also got to take into consideration that not just the information hasn't just helped us to advance our intellect, but it's also helping us to advance technology to the point where a lot of the things that we needed government for in the past, some kind of central planning model, some kind of centralized system, you know, to distribute or to figure out social and economic policies and how that should unfold or interact. Well, now we don't no longer need government as the pretense or the means to an end anymore, because smart contracts, modern technologies that are based on blockchain is enough that we can now actually basically eliminate and move forward, move past into the 21st century, past the point where we need top-down authoritarianism or central planners to dictate or micromanage everything that we do in the social or economic realm. Now, with smart contracts, like I said, no intermediator, no lawyers, no central planners, no government, no politicians are needed or necessary. I'm going to start sharing the links on my social media pages. I'll let Matt kind of tie up and talk about what we're going to be discussing today.
Yeah, so like my father said, we've already been through the philosophy behind, freedom and the non-aggression principle and all that kind of stuff. But there's still a lot of people that have questions of how this kind of experiment would play out in the real world. So in today's podcast, we're going to give you real-life scenarios and explaining in each areas which the government currently provides services for, and how we could transition out of that to a free market where we provide services in a voluntary manner. And I'm also going to take an approach of playing the devil's advocate during this. So I just want to foremost say at the beginning of this podcast that some of the points I may argue throughout this podcast I do not agree with, but for educational purposes, I'm going to try to play the devil's advocate role, because I know there's a lot of people that have questions about these ideas and these concepts. So I will do my best to play the devil's advocate role, to ask those hard questions and critique even a few things such as like capitalism, and critique how some of these structured voluntarist organizations may work like that. So I'm going to just bear with us here while we get this stuff posted up on live.
Yeah, I know. I'm getting it here. I'm almost done there, folks. Just give me a sec. It's actually too bad you can't do this before you go live. Hey, YouTube, if you're paying attention, yeah, try to set this up so we can do this before we go live. It would be nice. But yeah, just give me a second. Okay, so now it's on Twitter.
I'm also going to be taking a look at the chat while we're doing this. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll do our best to answer them.
Yeah, actually, that's a very important point there, Matt. Actually, let me just say this before we actually start into it here. Okay, get this all fixed up. So yeah, let me just say real quick here before we actually start into this. I am really sorry. I apologize to all of you who have watched our past podcast so far. I did want to do this live so that the people that are, watching this live do have the ability to interact and engage. But because this is a new endeavor, and I guess I'm the old dog that's trying to learn some new tricks, it's not quite as conducive. I'm not quite as well or adapted to this multitasking as some of the younger generations are. But I definitely want to get to the point where this becomes much more seamless and more comfortable for me, to the point where I can definitely engage and discuss or talk or converse with, or at least talk about the points that people are bringing up in the chat portion of this, because that's why I do this live. Otherwise, if I didn't care about what you had to say, I would just do it in just a pre-recorded video form. But I do care about what you've got to say. So please just bear with me here. I'm just trying, like I say, this is a new endeavor. And like I say, it's really difficult to teach old dogs like myself these new tricks, but I'm learning, I'm adapting, and I will get better at some point in time. So just have some patience. But yeah, Matt's going to help me out in this endeavor in this regard. And we're going to definitely try to look into see what people are saying in the chat, so that we can start to reference and respond to some of your questions or concerns.
And while he's getting that all set up, so just to point out a few criticisms of our current system of government, ones that we already know about. And the most common one is the fact that, throughout history, we've had common rules and principles such as, we teach children, do not hit, do not steal, do not be violent against another human being. And these fundamental principles and rules are where the state and government violate. So they have like this monopoly over force and coercion. And that's where a lot of the problems go wrong in society. And you remove that monopoly of violence and coercion, you can allow the free market to thrive. So when it comes to do not hit, well, the government has the authority to hit, to enforce certain rules that may not adhere to everyone's moral principles. And the law is very confusing. And one thing that I said this to a lot of lawyers that I've interacted with the public. I've even had conversations with police officers about the same thing. And it's, don't you find it very strange that a police officer, to become a police officer in today's world, needs very minor actually law education? There might be, and maybe to be a police officer, it's a year to 1 to 2 years to become a police officer out on the street. During that 1 to 2 years of training, majority of it is physical combat training, learning, your role, learning how to use a gun, learning how to defend yourself. A small portion of that is actually learning the law that you're enforcing. So let's even give a cop the benefit of the doubt. Let's say he has 2 years of training and a whole year of that is dedicated to schooling, which I know it's not. But 1 year of law education, and this guy is released out on the public, and he is now to enforce every rule, law, and regulation that you see on the books, which is so thick nowadays that you would never be able to understand all of the rules and all the laws. And that's why cops even have a hard time even enforcing the law, because in most cases, they don't even know the law they're enforcing. And that's why you see in a lot of these videos, people who have owning the cops on the First Amendment and all these videos you see on YouTube that people watch all the time and go viral, is because the cops don't even know what they're enforcing. The same thing to lawyers. Isn't it funny that the cop is the first one who you have the interaction with, who enforces the law, and he's got maybe a year of schooling in law education. But the lawyer, the guy you're going to go hire to defend yourself in the courtroom, has needed 8 to 9 years of studying that black law book from front to back. And it took him 8 to 9 years just to be qualified to be able to defend someone in a courtroom. And this is the problem with our justice system nowadays. It's gotten too complicated. You shouldn't have to have 8 to 9 years of education to be able to defend yourself against whatever the government is criminally throwing at you. And this stuff should be extremely simple. And this is why we need to restructure our justice system so that every layman can understand what's right from wrong, when he's violating any kind of criminal law or not. And we'll get into all that in this podcast.
Yeah. Well, I mean, absent having a central planner, which is, well, what government is a representation of a monopoly of force or violence, as we all know and understand. And those that don't, well, hey, it's about time you get caught up to speed. That's what government represents, folks. Just look at the very definition. You don't have to go by what I have to say. Just look at what the defined meaning of what government represents, which is, once again, a representation of a monopoly of violence or force in any geographical area. So when you have a monopoly of force or violence, well, everyone else, think about if you were sitting in somewhere and trying to come up with a contract or some way to deal with each other. Like I say, it doesn't matter if it's social or economically. If someone within that room, if within the or around the negotiation table, if there's one participant that has the ability to ignore or override everything everyone else says that's sitting around the table because they have the monopoly of force or violence, well, then at least the rest of the participants, around the table are like, I mean, I'd like to be able to put forth the position or pretense that what I got to say shouldn't matter. But at the end of the day, no, ultimately the decision, the final decision, the final arbiter is this monopoly of force or violence, this person that's the representation of the monopoly of force or violence. So no one would actually want to enter into any contractual agreement or obligation when the other party involved in that negotiation has the pretense to force or impose their mandates or edicts on everyone else. Nobody would ever choose to enter into that contract or that kind of pretense of a contract voluntarily, which is why government has nothing to do with voluntary interactions. Everything else you do for the rest of your life, absent of government, everything that you've ever dealt with. You sign a contract with Bell or Rogers, or you buy your new car. You've signed, and you have the pretense of understanding of what the rules are of engagement or the rules of the contract, and you have the choice to either voluntarily enter into it or to not. With government, you don't have that option. You don't have that choice. So what we're talking about today is eliminating, and I think smart contracts based on blockchain technology has allowed us now to pivot away from having this central planning top-down authoritarian model. And because people always realized that, oh, they need someone that had a monopoly of violence as a means to impose or to maintain or strictly regulate contracts. That's why people chose, well, government was it was the only game in town, right? Is the monopoly of violence. Oh, if you want someone to make sure they're going to be beholden to sustaining their obligations in the contract, is to hold the gun to their head if they're unwilling to do so. Well, with blockchain technology, the gun's no longer needed or necessary, because the smart contract allows it that we can, because it has the ledger built right into it with everyone that participates in the blockchain technology, everyone has the ability to hold every particular actor within that blockchain technology to account. So there's no need to hold a gun to anyone's head, because 256-bit AES encryption, military grade, has allowed us to make it so that nobody can get in. Like, there's no such thing. And even people that have listened to some of the reports in the past where some of these blockchain technologies have had some negative consequences. All that has happened, folks, in the past are people that have stolen the infrastructure that holds the blockchain technology within its confines. But the blockchain itself, the information contained within it, has still not been impeded or intervened or interfered upon. All of that is still secured. So people that think they've lost their block or their Bitcoins, let's say, because Bitcoins are built on blockchain technology, well, they're not lost. They're still yours. The difference is someone else has removed the pretense from you to gain it, but they're not going to gain access to your Bitcoins either. It just means that they've made what has happened on those kind of situations is you've placed your faith in the hands of other people that are now holding your Bitcoins or your cryptocurrencies. With blockchain, rather than allow someone else to hold or retain your, let's say if you're using, let's say Bitcoin or your Ethereum, well, just put it on a jump drive, pull it out of your computer, stick it in your sock drawer, and nobody will be able to take it away from you. So really it comes down to blockchain can protect you, but the only thing it can't protect you from is your own stupidity or your own bad decisions. Just like, if you had a bulletproof wallet, right? That was locked up and nobody could steal the money within it. But if you left it somewhere or if you lost it, well, you're still going to lose access to your money because you lost your wallet. But at the same time, no one else is going to be able to take your money as well. And blockchain and smart contracts and this kind of technology that it's built and maintained upon allows us to be able to do things that historically we would have never been able to do. And we had to rely on these third-party intermediaries, whether it was the banksters or government, the people that could impose and make sure that contracts, the obligations were followed out and followed through by all participants involved. Today, that's no longer necessary or needed.
So I guess let me start off by doing the devil's advocate role here. And one of the major problems, and I can break it down, the major concerns that people have when we start talking about a voluntary society is, one, what are we going to do about the super wealthy rich, and what are we going to do about the super poor? Because they're on both ends of the spectrum. So, if we have a voluntarist type society, it's probably going to be on the backbone of capitalism, which capitalism is free market win-win exchanges. Now, if I were to play devil's advocate to capitalism or critique capitalism, and I would pose this question to my father, what are we going to do about the hyper wealthy? So if you play a game of Monopoly, at some point through the game, a couple people are going to hoard a vast majority of the resources. Maybe they're like a Tesla. Maybe they're like a Jeff Bezos. They create something, a product or service in the free market that is so loved and so everyone wants it, that it creates that monopoly. Look at the smartphone industry. Pretty much everyone's got a smartphone. So, the guys at the head of Apple obviously has a monopoly in that field. He's got so much money. Same with Bezos and some of these guys. So when you're, like you said, when you're playing the game Monopoly, certain people are going to gain a lot of the resources. Now because they're so successful, I get that, and they've created a product or service that they deserve. And then I know you're already going to come up probably with the comeback of, well, they've created a lot of jobs, they've created a lot of wealth, they've done a lot of good. Yeah, but in the same breath, why does this guy get to hoard, let's say, $60 billion of these Bezos in his bank accounts that is not really doing anything? It's not really cycling throughout the economy. It's not really helping anyone. He's just sitting on it. being a fat cat, well, you got a bunch of people in the surrounding area who may be starving or going hungry. Because one of the things that I know this comes up when we debate freedom and capitalism and stuff like that. It's like, well, what if you got a guy who has a water store and he's in the desert, and you got a guy who has stumbled across this water store and he's starving of thirst, he's about to die. Is it immoral if he steals a bottle of water to save himself? Now, a lot of people, like I've heard Molyneux had this posed to him, and he's like, it's pretty insane that you got to pick such an outlandish, rare circumstance in which theft in that case may be okay to save the guy's life, or the guy who doesn't give that guy a bottle of water if he needs it to save his life is an asshole. But couldn't you make that same stretch that someone like a Bezos, who's got $60 billion sitting in his bank account while he's got people living in his own city who are impoverished and poor, does that then give those people the right to go into Bezos' store and steal some of their products to survive?
Well, actually, that's a great question. And that's a lot of points you put out there, and very, very important that you did so. But yeah, the pushback's coming right now. But that's the thing with a decentralized platform that's based on blockchain technology, where every participant involved along that entire chain has a copy of the ledger. It allows everyone to have our own pretense of what we determine and measure in terms of value, right? So a blockchain technology, right now, Minds is one of these modern social media platforms that will eventually transition to a full blockchain type. I believe Ethereum is what they're using as the underlying premise for the blockchain technology that they're going to be unrolling eventually. Right now, they have a system set up, and I'm on there, where it's a point system. So this is our own form of online currency. Now, the currency is not controlled by any central planner. There's no central banker involved. So what it is on Minds, I can get if I engage, if I participate enough, if I do enough work, right? If I provide something of benefit, of value to other people, I gain as a benefit these things that's called tokens. A token is a representation of 1,000 points. I can then in turn reciprocate or reuse those coins, those tokens, or those points to help other people. So even though I've gained an economic value, because that's the thing, these points will be convertible and transferable, not just to blockchain-based technologies such as cryptocurrencies, but it'll also be convertible to even fiat currencies if you need to do at some point in time in the future. So no one else gets the ability to dictate and determine what is the measure of value. So because I, as the end consumer, as that participant in that blockchain technology, I get to dictate and determine based on my own purchasing power what I deem is valuable. So I might purchase or maybe give 500 or 1,000 points to people that haven't actually done anything that you would normally consider of typical labor or value in the real world, the tangible world we live in. But because they're doing it on the online sphere, and because it is information that is definitely something that I find very valuable, that I feel that I can reward them. And because I reward them, they've gained a monetary compensation in some regard that they can then use and determine where they want to place that value, or hand off a certain portion of that value to someone else. So no one now has the ability, under a blockchain smart technology kind of contract, nobody has the ability to dictate and determine what is deemed valuable. Right now in the world, value in the economic realm is only scalable to things that have this constant growth method, right? But that doesn't have to necessarily pertain to what we use as far as blockchain technologies. We can deem things now to be valuable and something we're worthy not just to support, but to pay people for. And because there's no one that has the ability to dictate or determine or devalue what that worth is, because like I say, the blockchain allows us to all hold each other to accountability, where nobody has the ability to, here today in with modern fiat currencies, well, they can just print the money, right? They can just print money, but that devalues and debases the currency, so that destroys your purchasing power. On a blockchain technology or a ledger type system, where we all have to be held to account and nobody has the ability to manipulate or dictate how that is, then that value will follow forward and won't be easily manipulated by someone else or some foreign or external actor. So everyone has the ability now where you can, like I say, if it's something that you deem that's worthy, then you have the ability to take and place a genuine, not just your own personal value on it, but something that can be converted to your own personal value into tangible money or into tangible currency. So blockchain technology has allowed us to be able to do that.
All right, so I guess you're saying the solution would be voluntary charity in order to deal with the poor. Because like I said, if we have an anarchist type libertarian society in the free market, like I said, we're going to have the common critiques to that is the hyper wealthy and the super poor. So you're going to get those who make the argument that, well, the poor can't pay for services like policing, like courts to arbitrate, and all the basic services like ambulance and healthcare. That's always the thing that gets posed to us libertarians is, well, what about the poor? The state comes in at the force of violence and coercion, which is immorally wrong, but they level the playing field. This is if I play devil's advocate, they level the playing field so that no matter what, even the poor gets that police call. If the poor calls the police are going to come. Or vice versa, the ambulance or whatever. So the problem, like I said, is what do we do about the poor who can't afford to be paying for these services that they need vital to make their life, their quality of life better? And what do we do about the hyper rich who do super well in a capitalist society, and then like on the monopoly board, they start dominating through that wealth and by creating monopolies and just hoarding the wealth in their bank accounts while people starve below them.
Yeah, well, I mean, once again, because of basically what you allude to is, especially in regards to the poor people, as a person, and I'm sure we've all seen this, just go stand on a street corner someday down in Yonge Street, let's say, in Toronto, downtown Toronto. You'll see there'll be all kinds of people every day, all day, every day. You'll see people that'll stop and be handing those poor people some money. And those people that are handing those poor people some money, they're not just doing it because of their own personal benevolence. That's also an important aspect and contributing factor, but they also probably care about the fact that they want to help these people out enough that they're not, going to be robbing them later. Because if you live in a community where there's a substantial portion or even any kind of minority population of homeless people, you realize that everyone's going to have to do something to sustain their own personal livelihood and to keep, food in their belly to sustain their life. So you have the ability to, like I say, you can use these blockchain technologies rather than cryptocurrencies, although you can, like I say, you convert it into just monies or dollars or cents and, hand it out just like you do today to help people in dire need. Or you can say, listen, rather than just constantly handing out money to these people, maybe you can say, hey, you now have the capacity, the ability, because there's no central planner now that gets to dictate and determine what you do and to measure the value. The consumers, the market will determine anything you do, whether it's valuable or not. Now you can take a homeless person that maybe, in the current system, maybe what they have to provide isn't economically viable or has the ability to sustain their livelihood. Well, in the blockchain technology, in the new world where we can actually, like I say, use different means of currencies to measure value and to compensate other people, they might be able to create their own situation where they can do something that is valuable for people. And then that sustains them, which is healthy for their psychology and their bottom line and their ability to take care or sustain themselves. But it also allows it to be, once again, done freely and under the voluntary means or measured, like we do now. If you're handing out the guy, that's standing on the corner, if you hand them the $5 bill, you can do that today in the blockchain technology and allow them to gain or participate in this new digital era and see that if what they have is of measurable value. And if it is, well, they should be rightly rewarded and compensated for such. Right now, as it is, what they're doing is apparently not productive or valuable to most. So what happens is you force government, to create all these institutions or these bureaucracies that are meant to sustain or to take care of these people. But you got to keep in mind too, a lot of these people, especially homeless people, the reason why they've chosen to be homeless is because a lot of them, if you talk to them, they don't actually want to deal with government. They don't want top-down authoritarianism because they realize with that pretense of charity from government comes with a whole lot of caveats, a whole lot of rules, regulations, and authoritarianism. That means they have to abide by shit they don't want to deal with. So really, a lot of the homeless people actually today don't have to be homeless, don't have to be poor, but because they don't want to, suck up or cater or coddle the people with the gigantic gun in the room. They don't want to be the ones that have to plead with them to take care or sustain them. They would have the ability to do it themselves. And as far as the rich people, well, the rich people are already rich. The well-connected, the people that already have access to basically, the central planner's ability to manipulate the economy. That's what the central planners have been doing. That's what the central banks, since the 2008 crash, central banks, well, between the IMF, the U.S. Federal Reserve, you're talking about they've printed, what is it, in excess of the $3.5 to $4 trillion to try to pump up and sustain this false economy. Look at how much of that money was wasted and squandered as a result. Like I say, blockchain allows it to be decentralized so that people have the ability to do whatever they need to do to sustain themselves and to help others, but without a top-down authoritarian measure where it's a one-size blanket approach that doesn't really actually help everyone. It only helps a very small minority segment of the population.
Yeah, so I'm going to take my devil's advocate hat off for a second and answer the questions also myself and give my take on it. So when we get posed the question, what do we do about the poor in a free market society? So, I would argue that under a current government-run society, we have poor anyway, regardless. Like you say, we still have the problem of poverty. The question, though, is in a free society, the people who are impoverished, who can barely afford to live, we're only talking probably about a small percentage of the population. For the most part, people find a way. People find jobs. People mingle in the economy, and like you say, can put food on their plate. So let's say we're dealing with maybe 10% of the population, which I still think is pretty high, who just are incapable of even feeding themselves, or that impoverished, who aren't even capable of working in the workforce. What do we do about those people? Well, I would argue, rather than morally violating 100% of the population's rights by stealing their money through taxes to provide for 10% of the population, we can deal with this 10% of the population, like you said, through voluntary charitable organizations that are a lot more effective, that actually have a hands-on investment in making sure this person does well, rather than state just giving out money. And also, when you have the state and you give it that power to tax, you open up the risk of them abusing and spending the money not correctly. So I would argue that it's inefficient as well. So yes, if you hold a gun to everyone's head to make sure that 10% have welfare services, yes, that works. But then you open up the opportunity for that power to initiate violence, to control that money. You open up that to be manipulated, and you open up that politicians to be bought off and bribed, and that rights to be, or that power to be violated. And then you take advantage of the 90% by stealing their money. And 10%, we could take care of 10% charitable organizations. We really can. It's not that much. And I think people get a mindset too of when they're taxed that, oh, well, there's welfare services out there, so don't worry about that person. And a lot of people carry themselves that way when they come across homeless people in society, because they know we have services to help this people. So I feel if you got rid of that blanket, and then you'd actually realize that, oh, we as individual people have to help these people. And sometimes I'd also make the argument that, with freedom comes risk and responsibility. It's the same thing with the insurance claim. I'm actually of the mindset that legally we shouldn't be required to have car insurance. Now, people freak out at that. They're like, oh my God, well, what if someone has an uninsured car, drives down the road and smashes into my car, killing my family? What am I going to do? Now they can't pay for any of that. And I'm actually of the mindset that, yeah, freedom comes with risk. So rather than making everyone forcibly pay for insurance on their car, there are going to still be some people who financially can, who will do that anyway. But most people understand that if I get into an accident, I want to be covered. I don't have the money to rebuy my car sitting in the bank account. So I'd rather pay a monthly fee to ensure that my end and their end, whoever I hit, we're going to be taken care of. So most people would have insurance anyway, just the same way you'd have house insurance in case your house burnt down. And if you eliminated the law behind insurance, people would still have it for that safety net. But there would be people who wouldn't. And I'm willing to drive down the road at the risk of my own family being killed by an uninsured driver, of just having the ability whether or not to pay in or not. Freedom comes with risk and stuff like that. And what was that saying? If anyone who wants total security, the sacrifice of freedom gets neither. And basically that's what it boils down to. I'd rather have the freedom versus the security blanket that government likes to argue and say they provide.
Yeah. Well, actually, I'm just going to kind of reference, because I kind of got a little bit off track there. But anyways, so what I was starting to talk about in regards to the information, the age of information is, so philosophy, politics, science, history, geography, language, all the things that historically, and talking as someone that grew up, and I'm only a Gen Xer, I'm not that old, I'm 48, old enough, I guess. But even just in my time frame, less than 50 years, half a century, I've seen that when I was a kid, even to have access to the kind of information that's readily available today, that was restricted mostly to people that would have been considered middle class or upper middle class or upper class. Dictionaries when I was growing up would cost, thousands of dollars, and thousands of dollars back in, the 1970s or 80s was a lot of money, which meant a lot of people, not just in Canada, but the US, a lot of places around the world had no access to the kind of information that's readily available today. And the beautiful thing about today in the digital sphere, in the internet era, in the age of information, is everything's reproduced and replicated in digital form. So, perfect example, a book, such as an encyclopedia. An encyclopedia, just one edition, or just one book of an entire edition, there might be 26 books in an entire encyclopedia edition. So each book, though, you had the was it like corrugated cardboard, you had whatever material for the cover they used, you had the ink, you had some gold embossing, you had the paper for the pages within. So you had a lot of resources that went in to reproducing these books. And each book needed that same kind of, a massive amount of resources to produce it. Like I said, the ink, the wood, the paper comes from wood, but all that's contained, like I say, to create a book was very, very expensive and required a lot of resources. Where today, if you've reproduced, this video that I'm doing today, that we're doing today, I can reproduce and replicate it just with digital technology, and all it costs is the broadband to share it. So you just hit copy and paste. I mean, if you're on the internet, today it's super easy to replicate it because the digital replication is extremely easy and very cheap. Just a matter of the cost of that little bit of broadband you'll need to share and reproduce it. So today we have access, like I say, to the breadth of all of history's knowledge, of all that knowledge that's built up. I mean, think about the Library of Alexandria, or even down the Library of Congress. These places, these books, if you measured in some kind of modern value, what all those books would be worth, it'd be probably to the tunes of billions of dollars. But because, we can reproduce and replicate those books in digital form, we can translate those forms in easily expandable measures where you could have millions, billions of people that'll have them instantly in real time at light speed, 186,000 miles a second, at such a fraction of the cost that entire library is actually, I think I heard someone say, I don't even want to quote it exactly, but I think the entire Library of Alexandria, you could stick on nowadays in just a few of those little jump drives, right? Terabytes worth. So you could actually put all of that, which historically maybe would have been almost impossible to measure as far as economic value, but now that value is been greatly reduced. Well, there's a lot of value still within it, but the cost you as the end consumer is going to have to be is greatly reduced today because now it's easily convertible and transferable in the digital sphere. So like I say, there's no excuse anymore. That's why I love sharing that. And I used to have it always on my TV a lot of times when I was doing my videos in the past, is in the age of information, ignorance truly is a choice because it's right there for you. Whether you're poor or rich or anywhere in between, it's there for you. So there's no longer an excuse anymore to remain ignorant, folks. It's there in the age of information if you want it. You just got to reach out and grab it.
So one problem I actually see, this is a little bit related, but one problem I see that we're going to run into and we're going to have here probably within the next 10 to 20 years, possibly sooner, is like you say, we know that right now we're not in a true free market society, that the state intervention in our free market is actually like a big, massive boot on our neck, and it's stifling a lot of innovation and a lot of wealth that could potentially be coming into our economy. And what I'm worrying about is you have the state who is stifling innovation, keeping money out of the economy, holding us back in a sense with their archaic forms of control. And then you got, like you say, technology and automation, which is growing at an exponential rate. It's insane. So as we get smarter and smarter and our technologies get better and better, it's going to be more and more automated. And what I'm worried about is when you have massive technology creating massive automation, but you're still living under a state-run society who is stifling innovation and wealth, at a certain point in time, a massive portion of the population is going to become unemployed. There's going to be nothing to do. And we're currently running into this problem with potentially the conversation surrounding truck drivers and automated trucks and, you know, all the other services. Like, you know, you work in a factory now, a lot of it's being built by robots rather than humans. So this is a major problem. So we know that automation and technology is moving faster than we are capable of dealing with, and we can't prepare for it. And, you know, maybe if we were living in a total free market, all that extra wealth and letting the free market loose and you know, creating all that new wealth into the economy might kind of keep the automation in line. But because we have this current structure of state-run economics, I'm really worried now that what is going to happen to all these people when they're unemployed, when the automation is to the point where a lot of us don't have to do much. Now, in a total utopian society, it should be that the easier it gets to build these products, the easier it gets to build a house. Shouldn't it be the cheaper it is to buy a home? Which is not the case. You know, here in 2019, it's actually, you can see people put up a home in about a week or a month. They can build a whole new home that, you know, with all these advanced technologies, robots and power tools that we didn't have years ago. So common sense would think that because it's easier to build a home and faster to build a home now, it should be cheaper to build that home. That's not the case under our current structure of government, because, you know, you got the banks inflating the money and stuff like that. Like you say, you got state control over the economy. So I'm really worried that under this current structure, we're going to get to a point where the technology is overnight going to create jobs almost obsolete. And you're going to get a lot of people in that moment being like, oh my God, what do I do? And they're so used to government and state-run intervention that they're going to be crying to the government that we all need universal basic health care, universal basic income, and all these socialistic views that we're seeing being brought up into our politics today. And that's a result because of the state involvement in our economy in the first place. But I do believe we're running into a major problem with this.
Yeah. Well, the big part of in regards to this whole aspect, as far as the age of information, that I want to point out right now is, like I was referenced, and I'll point out, a properly educated and informed society is a free society. So like I was alluding to, is in regards to the education system, because we live in the age of information today, historically in the past, and Matt can definitely speak to how expensive our education system, especially in regards to the post-secondary aspect of the education system, how expensive it is. And the problem, of course, when you run yourself through our current top-down authoritarian type structure as far as education is, you might get an inept teacher that actually is not very conducive with properly educating and informing you, but they've got the position of, you know, being a part of government, right? The double layer of bureaucracy to protect them from being actually held to account. In the private sector, in the private sphere, well, if you're not competent in your job, well, you're passed over for someone that is. In government, in that kind of top-down structure, you just have to be part of the connected or ruling class. And like I say, you have double, triple layers of bureaucracy that could keep the most inept, the most incompetent people educating and informing the young people. And look out there today, if you question that reality, that is a fact. Just listen to what Jordan Peterson said. He himself has admitted, and he comes from the halls of academia, that a lot of the people that are coming out of these education institutions today are not just, you know, not being properly informed, they're being indoctrinated into some kind of ideology, and actually things that are rejecting the very premise of scientific endeavors, objective reality, logic, you know, morality, of common sense. These are people that are coming out basically like as if they were coming out of some kind of religious institution, because that's what schools have turned into today, are basically quasi-religious institutions that teach them a top-down form of authoritarianism that keeps them inundated with the pretense of the state. Like the state is the new overarching authority in regards to everything they do in the social or economic sphere. But in regards to, you know, like I say, blockchain technology, or the ability to now have the information age take advantage of educating us properly, you can have the most intelligent. So Jordan Peterson is a good example. I brought him up already. So Jordan Peterson, usually historically, when he was putting out his courses or classes, you know, to take his course might have cost you thousands of dollars. And you were only allowed to sit with what, maybe 30 or so of your other peers, because these classrooms, the sizes were quite small in scope. So Jordan Peterson, as intelligent as he is, and he can definitely educate and inform people a lot in regards to psychology or history, or even in regards to ideologies, in regards to collectivism versus individual freedom and liberty, he could still only teach people 30 or 40 at a time. Today, and he's recognized himself with YouTube and all these modern technologies at our disposal, actually he could teach people to the tune of millions, ultimately, if you want, billions of people at the same time. So you can watch his lectures or his classes that he puts up, and if it's recorded in video form and it's uploaded to his YouTube channel, well, rather than sitting in that classroom and paying, what, $20,000-$30,000 that year for whatever education you're receiving, well, you can now do that with just the cost of your internet connection and get the exact same education, the exact same guy, that exact same professor telling you the exact same thing, and you can learn and gain that knowledge at basically a fraction of the cost. So like I say, and like I say, historically, most people have understood the only way you're going to have anything even remotely resembling a free society is by having a society that is properly educated and informed in regards to what it is to even be a free human being. So like I said, the excuse that people had in the past, just 10, 15 years ago, it was just too expensive to get an education. Well, that's all been completely wiped clean, and now you're just going to have to start from anew with whatever kind of narrative that you're trying to repeat or regurgitate, because that's no longer a reality. The reality today is, like I say, millions or ultimately billions of people can be properly educated and informed in regards to not just the philosophy of liberty, but for a whole lot of things in regards to like economics, social policy, how we should interact, what's moral, what's ethical, UPB, Ayn Rand, objectivism. There's lots of information out there to help you get on board and start to understand what does it mean to not just be free socially, but as far as in the economic realm as well.
Yeah, you see this innovation in the business market, in the business world. So, you got people, businessmen who are in Tokyo, and you got businessmen in America, and they need to come up with a new plan or something to do with their business. Most of them now do Skype calls or conference calls. They're not actually physically hopping on an airplane and going to the other business owner's business, sitting in his conference room and discussing these ideas. And I definitely, if I had to close my eyes and think of where our education system is going, it's for sure VR is the solution. Why are we getting a bunch of kids piling on a bus, taking the risk of driving them down the public highway at risk of being in an accident, to meet up with a teacher to sit in an archaic classroom and teach these individuals all these principles and concepts? So definitely I see the future of education as you go into your room in your home, you put on a VR headset, and bam, you're in some kind of classroom setting or whatever the setting may be. And yeah, we're going to communicate with our teachers that way. It just is a lot more efficient. We don't have to drive to talk and communicate with people. We can communicate with people in VR now. And I see this going to be a huge, huge innovation for a lot of things, especially in the education realm.
Yeah. So basically what you're saying there, this is good for those environmentalists among us, those greenies, right? Yeah. Think about this. The modern advancements in technology and education and the age of information is great for the economy and great for the environment, because now you don't have to, like Matt was saying, now all you people that are all about, reduced greenhouse gases or carbon emissions. Yeah. Hey, if you can educate 1 million people rather than, like Matt was suggesting or alluding to, having to travel to these schools or these central education systems that basically, like I said, you're only, it's not like you get to pick, right? You're going to be taught by whoever they throw you into. But like I say, today you can have the option to be taught by the best teachers out there, and you can save the environment at the same time and not have to do all these commutes back and forth to these education centers or these centralized institutions. So this is great for not just educating and informing people properly, but it's even great for the environment as well. One other aspect I was actually trying to cover in regards to education is the online courses. So when I was referencing the online courses, and Jordan Peterson is he's got some minds out there trying to develop a whole new structure. There's Khan Academy. There's already a few of them out there, folks, but he's trying to create a whole new system so we can have online college and university courses. The only thing that's on the other side of that equation is the accreditation. And at the end of the day, if you take a final exam, whether it's for PhD or like your postdoctorate or your master's degree or bachelor's degree, when you go to take these these exams or these final tests to determine your competency in those particular fields, that's really, at the end of the day, that's all that matters most. You know, like I say, whether it's in the academic field or in your typical construction fields, at the end of the day, it's just to prove your competence. That's what matters most. How you got to that point, that's kind of less important than what is the final result? What's the final consequences? What's led you up to this? So whether you went, like I say, to a public school education system or an online university or an online course or an online college, at the end of the day, what matters most is once you have some kind of form of accreditation that's not done by central planners or governments, but that is universally consistent, that has proper measures and values that will dictate and determine the outcome of how competent the person is, right? Because that's an easy thing. That's an easy formula. That's something that algorithms and science definitely has down pat. So we don't even have to second guess or question the fact that all you need to do is understand, you know, if math is an easy thing, 2 + 2 is 4. If the people answer the questions right, there's an easy computer program and software program you can set up that'll dictate and determine, hey, this person passed the math quiz because they got all the answers right. So accreditation is actually not something that has to be as big a deal as some people put forward the present. And that is actually, at the end of the day, what matters most to people is, okay, I want to be educated, informed, and if there's alternative options or venues for me to do that, that's great. But how do we translate that into accreditation? Well, once again, it's just a measure of competence. That's all accreditation truly is at the end of the day, is just a measure of your competence. And that's not a very difficult thing to do. They already do it today with old world technology. And now we have new technology can do it much faster, much more beneficial, much more prevalent, and much more universally consistent as well. Because that's the other thing. In the real world, what we rely on today is a particular individual's mind to be the determinant factor as far as accreditation, right? Picking winners or losers. An algorithm or something that is completely and universally consistent will be able to measure that kind of competence with no bias involved.
I know, just sitting here thinking of all the things that VR is going to be able to do. I mean, that just in itself is going to be such a life-changing innovation, because we're in literally the baby stages of VR right now, and I think that's going to shape our world almost as much as the internet. I mean, because just think about like the educational aspect of it. Like you said, there's people that learn hands-on here, and here's I found the problem with our current schooling system is there's different ways that people learn information. So there's people that can learn hands-on, and there's people that learn through the book. So I know I'm more of a hands-on person. So you go to be a mechanic, for instance, in school. There's people that can sit in a classroom, read the mechanical literature, and learn to build an engine that way. Or there's the people who will just, you throw them an engine out in the garage and they just start tinkering away, taking it apart and learning through hands-on how to rebuild that engine. Exactly. Two different ways. Well, VR will open up this opportunity to take each path. Okay. And that's the beautiful thing. But I'll also pose you this hypothetical too. What kind of scares me of VR is VR in the justice system. You know, is it more beneficial to house a human being, feed him 3 meals a day, provide him housing and stuff like that, give him a lengthy sentence of maybe 50 years in prison, or do you just stick a VR headset over his head and in 10 minutes he lives a lifetime of prison in a virtual reality prison? And then at that point, well, who has the power of these technologies? And, you know, we got to be careful of that. That's one thing that scares me about VR, and especially if we live under a government, is the you know, who wields the power once you're in there. And, you know, who's unplugging you out of the matrix? Who's pulling the cord from the back of your head? Or are you just stuck in there if you can?
Yeah. I understand that concern, but that's actually the beautiful thing. And I just can't help but think, and this is kind of new to me. I've understood blockchain technology, that underlying premise, and how all these Bitcoins or cryptocurrencies are based upon. But like I say, these smart contracts, because it does have this ledger, and it's, like I say, it's encrypted and so consistent, and you can't manipulate it. So that's the beautiful thing, like Matt's saying. Right now in politics, because we're all fallible human beings, it's easy to game the system. You just got to find a way, right? But because of blockchain technology, and because it uses an underlying algorithm, well, not necessarily an algorithm, sorry, I used the wrong terminology there, but it uses underlying software that can't be manipulated. It can't be done, right? So as much as a lot of people out there today would like to be the snake oil salesman, and they can do it. It's easy to manipulate you as an individual person because your mind is susceptible to manipulation. But these kind of blockchain technologies, you can't manipulate because everybody gets a copy of the ledger. Doesn't mean they know everything that you've done, because even though everyone, that's the other thing I want to alleviate the concerns that people might have. Oh, you mean everyone has a transaction of everything I've done? All they get is your wallet identification, right? So you're like, I don't know how long that number with, well, it's not just numbers, it's letters and numbers together, but all they see is that. So it's not like they know who the hell you are. You still have anonymity if you want it. But because that ledger does come with a descriptive nature as far as like your encryption key, they do know that that is a legitimate thing and it can't be manipulated or reconstructed or deconstructed to change the variables and be something different where they can manipulate it. In that scenario, there's no way to trick these things into doing something different. So we all will be able to have the capacity to hold each other to account and make sure, like I say, whether it's in regards to education or, and what I'm going to be talking about here next is healthcare. Healthcare is another thing where you have a relationship with, whether it's your doctor or your healthcare provider, because we have the ability now to not have central planning. It's decentralized with these smart contracts. Well, now we can even use that for healthcare services. And now, because there's modern advancements in technology to the point where actually you can use like not just algorithms, but robots and artificial intelligence that can perform routine surgeries. And they're starting to get to that point where that's starting to go to unfold probably over the next 20 or 30 years. Once again, because these technologies are based on uninterruptible, what's the word I'm looking for? Basically, you can't manipulate them, right? So today, why people are concerned is because if somebody can hack, right? If you can hack the system, well, who would want to be under the knife if this computer or this robot can be hacked? But because if it's done under a blockchain technology where everyone has the ability to make sure that, like I say, that ledger, if somebody enters into that system and tries to upend or do something that's nefarious, every one of us, if we're on that blockchain, if we're part of that blockchain, we'll all know the minute somebody tries to intervene or interject or manipulate, that contract or that particular system. So it's really easy to hold each other to account that way. We don't need, a whole lot of investigators out there trying to figure out who is the culprit, who did. Blockchain technology will make sure that we can actually hold each other to account and prevent these kind of situations from unfolding. That's the big thing I see today is today we have no ability. That's why we create all these bureaucratic systems and institutions. Well, not we. I sure shit didn't invent them. But people, their fears, their concerns are always about, well, let's create multiple layers that will protect us. Well, you only need one layer with blockchain technology because, like I said, it can't be easily manipulated or misconstrued or misrepresented. So if you want to hold each other to account in every area of our social and economic lives, or in regards to the healthcare, is blockchain technology, and it's the ability to do that.
So what you're saying is we need a blockchain AI god who rules over us. No, isn't it funny though how history plays out? Like if you go by the Bible history stories, you got the story of Moses. He goes to the top of the mountain, and God gives him visions and hands him the 10 Commandments. Here's the principles to live by. Live by these principles, and you will be successful. And imagine in 50 years we get the same thing where it's we get this AI blockchain technology computer, and we feed it ideas of socialism, communism, capitalism, voluntarism. We feed it all these different principles and how to live lives, and it comes out and says, all right, this is the best way to live life, the most moral, and hands us our 10 Commandments once again. Oh, how history will repeat itself.
Yeah, but so you're thinking about that. See, that's actually where you're a little bit mistaken in the interpretation of what blockchain is, because it's completely decentralized. It's just me and you. Like it's as if I wrote, like I say, I wrote the terms of a contract. So let's say, actually, since I'll move it a little bit further down, because a perfect example would this be in regards to, like, let's say we were purchasing a car or home. I just have to set out the terms of our agreement. So I want to sell you my home, let's say for $250,000. You agree to it. I agree to the terms of the contract. Let's say 20 years, blah, blah, blah. Because that blockchain technology allows it, not just me to keep and maintain my copy of the receipt, right, which is the contract. You also get a copy of the receipt, but everyone within the blockchain gets to keep a copy of the receipt. It's not like they're going to be able to necessarily read it per se, because once it's said, it's already based on encryption. But because it's based on encryption, if anyone tried to hack into the system and manipulate or, rewrite that contract in any way, you're going to be notified instantaneously. I'm going to be notified instantaneously, and everyone on the entire blockchain is going to be notified. So there's no way that you can try to skirt or rewrite that contract in your favor, that you get to benefit in some way and say, oh, instead of the interest rate, oh, you wanted to charge me 5%? Well, hey, I like 2% better, so let me rewrite this contract so I'm only paying. No, because the minute you did that, everybody sees it. So you can't trick us. Like I say, what it is, it's decentralized. That's the beautiful thing about this, is because I would never want some central planner, right? That's that Orwellian bullshit, that big eye that's watching over us dictate. No, it's just us being able to hold each other in account, because our contracts are basically proverbially written in stone. So we all know the minute somebody tries to chisel it, hey, I see what you did there. So nobody's going to be able to skirt or try to circumvent blockchain technology. They're going to have to be held to account. And because it's decentralized, where we can do it properly and everyone has the ability to see what's been done, it's not like you just have to rely on like he said, she said kind of thing. No, it'll be everyone else against the one person that tried to manipulate. So yeah, good luck trying to game that kind of a system.
Yeah, no, I'm just having fun. I'm just messing with
you. I hear you, Matt. Go for it.
I'm just thinking of, utopia's technological advanced societies 50 years out or something, what it might look like. And, just to skip off the cuff and off the record right now and talk about some fun things, let me pose this question to you. If tomorrow, or if 50 years from now, they come with you with some kind of technology that they can convert your biological body into an android type body and you can live on forever, do you take the plunge? That's the true question.
I would have to.
Then you got to pose the question: if you believe that there's an afterlife, you just locked yourself into a biological android. Can you kill yourself once you're in that form, or are you stuck forever? Who's controlling the android?
I know. I really though, Matt. I have no idea, man. But that's the thing. But that's the thing. Me as a tangible human being, I mean, I don't know whether they'll ever get to the point where they'll be able to completely reproduce that. It might be something that might happen at some point in the future. And if they can, hey, it's good for me, but it's probably going to piss off a whole lot of my haters out there. It's like, oh, shit, man. We were hoping at least at some point in time Bennett would fucking cease to exist and we wouldn't have to listen to him ramble on about freedom and liberty. You better hope, fuckers out there, that it never gets to that point where I can reproduce or keep going on for hundreds of years. Because if you think you heard enough of me now, yeah, wait till the point comes where I don't have to, you can't shut me down or turn me off. I'll be your worst fucking nightmare.
Well, these are the big questions that libertarians want to know about. They don't want to talk about principles anymore. They want to know, if you copy yourself into an android, is it really you, or is it just a copy? And did you just kill yourself through the copying process?
Yeah, I know. No, but these are something that's definitely important to talk about for sure, because that's the thing, because we're early adopters with this technology, that will become very much mainstream. And basically, I imagine 100 years in the future, people are like, well, yeah, of course, everything's done under blockchain and smart contracts and this kind of advanced technology. What the fuck? It's like when I imagine today, or people that are driving cars, like, well, of course we don't fucking ride horses and buggies. Do you know how much shit the horses left along the roads? And do you know how long it took to get to town? You know how many bumps? You know how many times my wife almost got knocked out of the carriage because we had to hit all these potholes, right? No, so like I say, I can't even pretend to suggest or put forth the pretense that I know how things are going to unfold in the future. All I care about at the end of the day is making sure that we're at least proactive in making sure that if we enter into a contract, like I say, in my own social life, right? No government, like I say, in my own social life, I will always make sure that if I'm going to enter into any kind of social or economic transaction with someone, at the very least, one of the base premises, one of the most foundational important aspects of entering in that contract is, can I hold that person that's the other side of the party, the person on the other side of that contract, can I hold them to account and make sure that they're obliged to hold up their end of the bargain? Because at the end of the day, I think that's what most people really care about. And right now, today, we employ and spend and squander a huge portion of our GDP or all that economic prosperity that we produce on a daily and continual basis to pay off these fucking lawyers or these banksters or these central planning dipshits to basically do what, like I say, modern technology today, smart contracts can do, and we don't have to pay all these. Hey, that's one thing I will say. Smart contracts, blockchain, and cryptocurrencies, it's going to destroy some jobs out there. And the one area and one area of occupation that's going to have a detriment to a lot of people in that particular occupation is lawyers. And I mean, I got to say, folks, and I know there's some lawyers out there, and I know some of you are actually friends of mine on social media, and I get it. So don't take this to heart. But yeah, the less lawyers we need out there, fucking better I am off as far as I'm concerned, because I'm just, listen, yeah, I'm not even going to say nothing against your profession or your trade, but let's just admit it, folks. You're paid to be professional fucking liars. You're basically paid to take any stance or position, whether it's moral or ethical or the completely opposite. As long as you're compensated, you'll take whatever stance. And there's lawyers that'll defend fucking pedophiles on a daily basis. So if we have to reduce the size and scope of lawyers for the advancement or the betterment of the human psychology or the human experience and how we deal with each other socially or contractually in the economic realm, yeah, I think there should be some lawyers out there that's willing to fall on the sword for that kind of a cause.
Well, I think we need AI futuristic lawyers. AI lawyers is the way to go. No, but here's another question. Is the justice system doomed to be run by artificial intelligence? Because the problem with humans is, like you say, we are opinionated and we're fallible and we make mistakes and we adhere to certain values. If you've only learned your whole life that the world is flat, you may believe the world is flat, right? So we're susceptible to our brainwashing from our upbringing and stuff like that. So is the future having an AI judge residing over a case? You feed him the information and you feed him the data, and because he's AI, he's determining which is factually truth. There's no bias. There's no sides, or there's no left or right. Here's the facts of the case. Here's what is the answer. And maybe that's the solution. Maybe the justice system and a lot of these things that the government currently provides is going to move into an AI environment and take the human error out. The same way, when maybe that's the solution to a lot of it is completely removing humans from the justice system, because we are too fallible and we make mistakes. I mean, just look at the idea here in Canada, marijuana is legal now, right? So overnight, one minute it's illegal, you can be thrown in a cage for it, and then overnight it's perfectly fine and it's legal and morally we're okay with it. So as human beings, we're growing and we make mistakes where maybe an AI algorithm, we can explain to it like, hey, we want to live the most moral lifestyle. Here's moral ethics, don't hurt another human being, don't do this. And then it comes up with the best structures of how to structure society. So maybe the future is AI robots.
Well, yeah, and the only way that would actually work out properly, which is why we're kind of laying the groundwork today, because I think ultimately, at the end of the day, that's going to be the best case scenario as far as our jurisdiction or jurisprudence as far as how we deal with civil or economic conflicts, right? But the only way that's going to happen properly is if we remove the subjective nature of laws, right, and mandates. That's the problem with today's legislation is historical laws in regards to common law. English common law was the only thing that was considered an actual crime was things that could be proven to be objectively and universally true. So preemptive force or violence. So, if you use violence towards a person, you rape them, you stole from them, things that are universally consistent, because if you're going to build an algorithm, it has to be built and based upon something that's universally consistent. So whether it's, like I say, Ayn Rand's objectivism, Stefan Molyneux's universally preferable behavior, UPB, but we have to definitely shrink the size and scope of government to the point where the rules are universal and small in scope. So 10 or 12 rules for life, I think 10 or 12 could probably cover most areas or aspects of how we interact or engage with the other in the social or economic sphere, where we can hold each other to account if we're causing harm, like I say, socially or economically to each other. So 10 rules, 12 rules, like, theft, rape, murder, assault, all the basic things that actually, where you're causing genuine harm to another person. You have to have at least some kind of judicial system that restricts and restrains criminal procedures or criminal cases to the point where you're literally dealing with a victim involved. And if there is a victim involved, then you can use a kind of artificial intelligence or some kind of algorithm that can at least be much more conducive and universally consistent in comparison or contrast to a judge, right? Because a judge, like you're suggesting and alluding to, just a fallible human being. Let's say the judge fucking was pissed off and had a big fight with his wife, the weekend, and then this lady comes up that's got a hate on for some man and she's suing him. Well, he might have a judgment that's like, well, I'm not going to err on the side of this woman because I'm pissed off my wife that seems to be the same. Like, so he's going to make a wrong decision, right? She might have a valuable or verifiable position at stake towards her husband, but because the judge, like I said, because of something that happened in his own life, in his own mind, he's going to make a decision based on his own psychology. With a blockchain or an artificial intelligence, something that's completely universal and non-manipulative, well, that decision will be rendered time and time again. So it's going to be universally consistent. And if it's consistent, just like, like my kids, when I was raising my kids, the reason why they're at least mostly well-adjusted is because I was very consistent in my morals and ethics and the kind of rules that I imposed upon them. If I kept changing the rules every time I turned around and made them think that, well, I don't know what the fucking rules are anymore, because one minute dad says this is a rule and the next day he says, well, this rule is different. Now we're going to do it another way. Well, they wouldn't know. But because it's with, like I say, with artificial intelligence or some kind of underlying technology, if you can universalize that, I do think that's a much better choice than putting fallible judges in these positions. Now, I'm not saying, like I say, we should transition to this immediately, because I recognize there are nuances, because we do have a human brain that's much more sophisticated than most algorithms today. So there may be particular cases that are maybe not susceptible right now in this particular day, in this particular junction, that you could do so, that you could arbitrate or these disputes or disagreements with a blockchain or some kind of smart contract or that kind of underlying technology. But at the very least, we should at least be pivoting to that point that can deal with a lot of the areas or aspects that are actually quite easy to dictate and determine. And we don't have to pay, like, think about even what we have to pay for a lot of these judges today, where we could transition to these artificial intelligence programs that could arbitrate it more consistent, more universally, and not have to pay these bureaucratic institutions or these judges overinflated in salaries that actually a lot of times, as we've learned, actually circumvent and completely go against the consistency or the message that is supposed to be pertained in Western societies about individual freedoms. So blockchain technology can definitely help us in our court and our legal system.
Well, I think too we're at a dangerous time with all these advancements in technology, because, like you said, for the longest time throughout human history, we've had a ruling class. We've had of a bunch of elitists who kind of micromanage the societies. And, there's a lot of these people currently in place that are power hungry, power driven, your high up elite members, your politicians, your people in Washington and all that kind of stuff. And they like to cling to this power. And, what I'm massively worried about is, yes, technology is moving forward. And right now it's these higher up elitists that are in control of a lot of these technologies. And I worry that they're going to have the power of them. And let me use this as an example. So right now, we know that Elon Musk and a lot of the people in the tech industry are working towards making our brains interface with computers. So you got the smartphone here, and we can use this thing to Google and get all the technologies we want around the world. So the inevitable next step is to remove the physical object of the smartphone and just implant it in the brain. So if you got a question, you need to Google something, you can just ask it and your brain automatically will go to the Wikipedia website. So that's obviously the next step, is getting rid of the physical smartphone and implementing it into our human body, I think, is the next step. I think that's what a lot of the scientists are thinking of right now. And, I don't know where I was going with that, but I see you're thinking of it. Am I turning some thoughts over there?
Yeah, no, that's all good. I was actually looking on, because I was trying to pay attention to because I remembered shit. I can remember to start to pay attention to the chat. But then because I reloaded earlier, I think I'm behind the timeline to the point where I'm not seeing anyone engaged there yet. Well, there's only been 2 people so far, but I think because I reloaded, I'm back to the start. Anyways, yeah, sorry, I seem like I was doing too much thinking when I shouldn't have at that particular time. Anyways, but yeah, we'll definitely so another part, actually we already covered this, right? The please, as far as GPS technology, everyone has a camera, technological. Oh, actually, I don't know if we did, but I'm just going to cover it real quick. So like I wrote down here. So as far as like people say, well, what about, police service and security, and how should we protect ourselves and each other from criminals? Well, as I suggested or alluded to, I don't know if I did this earlier, but I'm going to do it now. So GPS technology, if a car gets stolen, come on, it's not that hard nowadays. Everything comes with GPS built in. You'll find your car if you have to. So technology, yeah, you'll find the car a lot quicker than the cops ever will, because you have access to.
What if the Tesla just facial recognizes you, realizes you're a criminal and you're not the actual driver, kicks you out of the car, locks it, and drives away?
Hey, even better. Exactly. Yeah. But in addition to that, so then there's
maybe the Tesla drives it to a police station and it just turns the guy in, right?
Hey, even better. Yeah. This is another easy example, because I'm sure Elon would be more than willing to write the software for that, right? But yeah, so in addition to that, and then the fact that everyone has a camera, we all carry around our smartphones today. So when you're worried about like criminal activity out there, historically, what you had to rely on, hopefully someone at least had a camera somewhere, or there's at least one witness that's seen the events unfold, at least partially. Well, nowadays, today, like I say, we have the ability to, not just based on, people's smartphones that are cameras that we carry around every day. Well, now we have satellites up there that can pay attention to a whole lot of shit that happens out there. And I'm not even saying necessarily that it's always a good idea to keep that big proverbial eye on everyone, but we definitely have the technology to greatly reduce and prevent crimes from happening. Well, maybe not necessarily prevent crimes from happening, although you can do that. Well, actually, the big part of prevention is to tell criminals that, hey, good luck trying it, but we've already got systems in place to make sure we'll catch you if you do. Because that is the major aspect or attribution to prevention of crime. Because I remember in the 90s or the 80s when I was growing up, people used to steal car stereos. Because back in the day, car stereos that came from the factory were very cheap, and they were built into this small little, what they call half din, the size, and you just steal the aftermarket radio out of the car and you put it in your new car and you're good, or your own car, and you're good to go. Nowadays, because of these stereos that are placed in the cars right from the factory, the minute you try to steal them or pull them out of the system, well, it makes that unit, it renders it useless. It destroys the unit the minute you take it out of the car that it was originally installed in. So criminals, even today, they realize the incentive is, fuck, I used to be able to steal a stereo out of a car and sell it for a couple $100 back in the day. Now, what am I going to do? Stealing a car stereo, and it's useless. The only thing I can sell it for is a boat anchor. And hey, it's not that expensive to buy a boat anchor. So they'll find that in another way. So technology has already prevented a lot of crime that you didn't need. And like I say, don't need courts to arbitrate, because if the crime has been prevented by technology, well, you don't have to pay a whole lot of lawyers or judges or arbiters to determine just the severity of the crime or compensate the people in regards to, whatever has happened as a consequence of this particular crime. Now we can do these things that can prevent crimes. In addition to that, we also have the fact, so police GPS is, yeah, for your possessions. So even not just your possessions as far as your car, but items that you carry, things that you carry around on you. Now you can put, I know, I know a lot of guys, and I worked before for a retail outlet that sold these GPS technologies. And I think it's a great idea nowadays. A lot of people are buying them for their aging and elderly parents or grandparents. So whether you place it on, like, let's say you buy it in necklace form or as a wristwatch for your grandma or grandfather, or you have a GPS device that you put on, let's say it's your smartphone already has it built in it. But let's say you've got something, a valued possession that you have, and you now have the ability to use these technologies to place that, to track it. Well, that, once again, now you don't necessarily have to concern yourself with buying a whole lot of expensive insurance, because now you have the ability to make sure that if someone does take control or take possession of your own article that is yours, well, you can not just track it down, but if you want, these technologies have the ability to make that item or render it useless to them. And a thief, once they understand that an item is useless to them because of technology that makes it that they stole something that has actual no tangible value, because that's the thing, a criminal, they have an incentive why they steal. Their incentive why they want to take things from you is because they recognize they have value. But if they steal something from you and the technology that you've used to prevent that theft from happening or to render that article or device useless once they stole it, well, where's the incentive for the thief to take all that, all the risk to steal your device if at the end of the day it turns out that all they end up at the end of the day is something that's completely useless and of no tangible or beneficial value to them? Well, that's an incentive to prevent a lot of theft and a lot of crime. Once again, no government, no courts, no lawyers, no cops needed or necessary.
All right. Well, if you want, I see we got a couple questions here from someone in the chat we can answer.
Yeah, go for it.
So we got a question that says, I would try that question. You do not know if there is an afterlife, but you certainly know that you will go on as a robot. So this person says that he would go on as a robot as the safe choice. So what do you think? What would you go on as?
That he's going to go on as a robot? Well, hey, good for you, I guess. I don't know how that's going to work out for you. I don't know how you figured how that's going to all unfold, but I'm not even understand what they're basically trying to put forward and present here.
Here, I'll pose it to you. Right now, we're having some off the cuff fun in this podcast.
All right, let's do it.
Let's go Joe Rogan here. Let's
just go fucking full Joe Rogan.
Lift up a dude.
Actually, no, hey, wait a minute. Let me just say, I don't want to go Joe Rogan because, and hey, not that I expect Joe's going to be watching my video. I get I'm just a nobody here compared to Joe. But Joe, man, you're disappointing me, dude. What the hell, man? We rely on you to show that you're a guy of courage and conviction. I get it. You want to placate and cater to some of your lefties because I know you're living out there on that West Coast. I know the people that you have to surround yourself with and kind of cater and cuddle to. But come on, Joe. If you're not willing to step up the game, hey, just admit that and let someone else carry that torch going forward. Because as much as I respect you for at least allowing the people to say what they got to say, I think it's really weird when you're out there constantly trying to hedge your bets and kind of align with some of these authoritarians in some way. You had Tim Pool on there, and he was, you had Jack Dorsey. Let me just finish this off, and then I'll shut the hell up about this. But you had Jack Dorsey and his fucking lawyer there on with you, and you still chose to join in and kind of push back against little old Tim Pool. And I love Tim Pool because he's the one guy out there, especially in the alternative media in the U.S., that seems to be the most prominent voice pushing back against this top-down authoritarianism and central planning. And he's a guy that even historically identified as a liberal or someone on the left, but yet he's trying to hold these people accountable. And Joe, you felt that you what? You had to help Jack? What? The CEO of Twitter? What the fuck? Or his goddamn lawyer, Lackey, that mouthpiece that he had on there that basically gave political cover or fodder for his kind of intervention into people's fucking posts and their tweets. You really felt that it was absolutely necessary to push back against Tim, that one guy. Joe, you got millions of people that pay attention to your channel. Twitter is fucking, like, come on. Look at the power Twitter's got and the lawyer for Twitter. Tim, I mean, he's a smart guy, but I mean, come on. This is a guy with what, a few 100,000 or whatever followers, and you're going to more or less going to pivot towards taking up the position of Jack. Let Jack answer his own fucking questions, man. Let Jack defend himself, or let his goddamn super high-paid, probably underworked lawyer answer some of those questions rather than you trying to push back against Tim. That's the only part about that whole interview. The rest of it, I think, was great, and Tim held himself to a real high standard, a real high regard. I have a tremendous amount of respect for Tim for the position they took. He's the only one that I've seen so far that is willing to hold Jack Dorsey to account, and he didn't back down for a minute. Hey, Joe, take your cues from Tim. Yeah, you might have built up a little of the muscles, but maybe that's that you're trying to compensate a little bit, right? Right? I don't know, Joe. I don't fucking know, Joe. But something tells me, and there's a reason why, I'm usually on your side for the most part, but I'm starting to see why more and more people are starting to turn a little bit against you because, like I say, quit fucking hedging your bet. Stand for principles. Stand for something. Or if you don't want to do that, then just go join fucking the rest of those lefties and late night talk show hosts. Stop trying to pretend that you're some kind of adversary to government or top down authoritarianism if you're going to constantly hedge your bets and hope that they'll keep you in their favor.
Well, I think the problem with Joe Rogan is he never intended this podcast to go all political the way. I think at first he just thought he was going to do a podcast with some of his friends, smoke some doobies, have some drinks on camera, talk about aliens, shoot the shit, which is cool. But it's kind of gotten away from him now, and it's gotten so politicized that now he's being forced to cover these political issues. And I think even Joe has even admitted from previous podcasts, I don't want to be the beacon of political speak. You know, Joe just wants to have a good time, talk MMA and all that kind of stuff. He's now being kind of forced because his platform is so big to cover these issues. But I think Joe's even said it himself before, like, you know, don't come to me for your political news or me to take principled stances, because he doesn't want to do that. I think Joe understands that when you have the conversations that we do about politics, it's a dangerous game. You got Edward Snowden, you got Chelsea Manning, you got people who are activists or journalists, you know, that talk about talking power, you know, talking to power, and get locked up for it. So, you know, I think Joe's like, I don't want to be a political martyr. I don't want to put myself in the spotlight. So I've always understood that about Joe, and that's why I don't hold his feet to the fire as hard as some of his fans do, because yeah, Joe's just a stoner, working out MMA guy. He wants to talk about aliens, shoot the shit. You want to go get your political news, go to some of your other guys, your Tim Pools. Yes, your guys are dedicated just to that. You know, and I hope that me and my father with our podcast, we can juggle a bit of both. Like today, like, yeah, we can have some fun. Let's talk about aliens, robots, and AI. But I'm going to get back to the question that guy posed to you, and what you were asking is, he wants to know if at the end of your life, you're on your deathbed, and I'll answer it too. You're on your deathbed. You know you're going to die in the next week or so. You have the option to upload your brain into AI, and you're going to live on forever in this computer AI body. Or do you die and run its course and take the risk of the afterlife? Now, he's saying, because he's an atheist, he's taking the approach that he doesn't believe there's an afterlife, so he would take the robot because it's a safe bet. That's what he's asking. But he's posing the question back to us. What would you do?
Yeah, but that's the thing. That would completely be, I would have to know what kind of a world are we living at that point in time. That's the thing with these people that paint these scenarios, is what they're doing is they're painting a little tiny aspect. They got a giant canvas and they're like painting this little corner over here. And they're like, hey, what would you do if in this scenario? It's like, well, what about the rest of the canvas? What kind of world am I living in there, dude? I don't know. What the fuck? I mean, if I'm living some kind of future dystopian hellhole, yeah, I'll fucking take my chances on the afterlife, right? Why the hell would I want to keep my brain in a bucket in this devastatingly destructive world where we're just living under this Orwellian newspeak or something, where we just follow or align with whatever our central planning masters tell us to do? I wouldn't want to live in a modern world of advanced slavery, even if they have the best technology on the planet, right? And they could make slavery so conducive that it's beneficial to everyone. Well, once again, the minute I recognize, oh shit, I'm in shackles, yeah, like I say, I'll take the chance in the afterlife. And actually, that might be the only time I'd ever get any peace. So I don't know why these people put forth these weird future utopian or dystopian premises, because you don't know how that actually unfolds, right? Rather than worrying about this, I get it though, right? Now, if I was Neil deGrasse Tyson and talk about some future dystopian, I would expect that question. But how about we worry about what the fuck was going on in the real world today, rather than worried about if we're just brains in the bucket in some future dystopian Matrix experiment, right? What the hell?
No, I think we're just having fun though. We're just posing these questions, but I don't know, like you, I have the same answer. I definitely wouldn't be the first one to go and sign up. You know, I'm gonna let thousands and thousands of people go ahead of me, and I'm gonna see how it works out for them, and then I'm gonna make the decision. But I don't know. I guess same with you. If the question was posed to me, it's what kind of world are we living in? You know, who has power of that Android body? You know, I don't want to go upload my body into an Android computer and my body die off, but my brain's still alive in this thing. And you ever seen the movie RoboCop when they first turn him on? And, you know, they completely control his arms and everything. He's RoboCop in the movie, and he can't even move, right? So I know my brain, I'm smarter than the average person, and my brain is my strength, but also my enemy. And I'm left with my brain and my thoughts, and I have no control over my body because some, you know, government deep state runs my body or something, or people have control of my android body, that's going to scare me, you know, if I can't actually control my arms and stuff. So I guess it, like my father said, depends on the world we live in that I make that decision. But I guess it's cool because we do need to start having these questions, because I think we're not that far off from them. And, you know, maybe in 100 years, this is an actual real question that Neil deGrasse Tyson's got to come up with an answer for. And I think why I like to dabble in these thought experiments is because, yes, we're moving towards these advanced technologies that are extremely powerful, that have the power to either unite a world, destroy a world. You know, these tools of technology can be used for good or bad. And if we are currently living under the current structure where, you know, we got these deep staters, this government control over top of us, this nanny state, and they seem to monopolize the money and monopolize these high technologies, whether it's DARPA in the military-industrial complex, these guys are the ones getting it first, and that scares the hell out of me. I don't want the government to be the first people to have the android army. We already see how incompetent, how dangerous government control is. So I think we need to start moving towards a freer world, because, yes, the world gets more and more dangerous with these technologies that can unite us or destroy us. And if we don't have the proper controllers at the time when these technologies take over, then these technologies will be used to enslave us, to destroy us, that they're currently being used in bombs and warfare over in the Middle East. All these technologies are using to kill people, not unite us. Yes, in some aspects over here in the Western world, we use this technology for good, but in a lot of bad. I mean, just look at the government NSA spying, and a lot of these technologies are used to spy on us and to run algorithms and to predict behavior and, you know, all that kind of stuff. So I'm very concerned about the ruling class right now, because they have these technologies and power, and they're being used against us, even in propaganda through the media. All that kind of stuff is COINTELPRO. It's all technology is being used against us.
Yeah. I don't mean to be too dismissive. Sorry about whoever did pose this question. Like I said, I don't mean to be too dismissive, but what it is you got to put yourself in my mind. Okay. I like I said, I've been doing this stuff for a long time, folks. And why I get a little bit, concerned and disconcerted when I hear this stuff is I just and I mentioned this in Matt Sands. I was having a conversation with Matt Sands yesterday in an interview I had with him. And basically I used the same expression for him as it's like niddle fiddling while Rome fucking burns. Like I say, if my house is burning down around me, why the fuck would I start to focus on some thing that's in the distant future at some point in time as my central focus point? I'm always going to keep that in the back of my mind. And like I say, there's definitely places or positions or particular platforms that I'll go. Like if people are talking about that's the premise of what they're discussing. I want to definitely get engaged and involved in these kind of discussions, because like I say, this is stuff that we should be talking about. We should be proactive and preemptive in talking about and discussing things that are going to potentially unfold in the future. But I also got to remember what happens today. This fucking matters too, right? I always want to keep the future, that's important. What's going to happen in the future is very important. But I will want to focus on what's happened today, right? Just like I say, if I was standing on a railroad track and I got my foot stuck between the tracks and there's a train barreling down, I mean, sure, I could spend the last fucking 5 minutes pondering oh, geez, I wonder how blockchain technology is going to play out in the future. Or I could focus on, figure out how the fuck I'm going to get my foot on this track so I can save my goddamn ass from getting run down by this fucking train that's barreling down against me, right? Right now, my biggest premise, my biggest position is we have the ability, we have the technology, everything is now at our disposal. I'm not even talking about some future dystopian or utopian future. Right now, smart contracts, blockchain technology, cryptocurrencies, they all exist. Like I say, we don't have to pretend. We don't have to create some conceptual universe that we can, well, what if? No, this is a reality that exists today. And because we know these central planners use top-down authoritarianism and their centralized structures to impose their mandates, wills, and edicts on our social and economic lives to manipulate and control them on a continuing ongoing basis, because we have all these technologies at our disposal that are readily available and quite cheap to adopt and implement, why are we not taking advantage of this? Once again, we don't have to use any violence. This is the beautiful thing. Think about history. When we wanted to overthrow authoritarian regimes in the past, what did that require? What did that maintain? Or what did that pertain to? a lot of people have to fucking suffer, right? A lot of death, a lot of blood, a lot of devastation, a lot of destruction. Today, we don't have to go that route, right? Like I said in many past videos, and you've seen me put out there, folks, the advancement of the Lightning 2.0 comes with the ability of we don't have to use violent conflicts, right? We can pivot away from top-down authoritarianism with things that are readily available here today. So I get it. Nothing against you folks that are worrying about these dystopian concepts as far as, whether we're all brains in a bucket. Get it. And always keep that, as a concern. That is something we should concern ourselves with. But at least prioritize things to the point where let's deal with today. Let's deal with the shit that's imposed on us today. And at least once we've done that, or at least even while we're doing it, then we can take the time to discuss these alternative options for something that may be the potential outline or how things unfold in the future. But let's deal with it today. Let's deal with today. Let's deal with the circumstances that are imposed on us in the here and now before we worry about what's going to happen or unfold in the future. That's all I'm saying.
America is the modern Paul Revere. So only 5 to 10% of the American populace at the time fought in the War of 1776 against the British. It was not favorable. The vast majority of the population was actually not in favor of splitting from the monarch and becoming their own country. So I look at America is that 5 to 10%. We are the modern Paul Revere's. If everyone who's freedom and liberty oriented can start moving to America, can start migrating into the West, and adhering to these values and principles, then we can be the light and the beacon in the darkness. It's pretty hard to convince the world of communism and socialism if all these places around the globe, people are living under these authoritarian regimes, and you got America living under freedom and liberty and, bald eagles flying around everywhere, then, it's pretty hard to look around at the Americans and be like, hey, I want that lifestyle. I want that freedom. Look how wealthy they are. Look at how successful they are in their societies. Look how happy they are. So that's why it's very important that America does not fall, and why the Trump movement and why libertarians are all moving back into politics, and why we're getting involved now, because we see America as that last stand. If America falls, the globe has no one else to really look to be like, wow, there's an inkling of freedom and what we could be if we strive to be better. So, it's hard for Kim to keep his regime when he's got South Korea right next to him. Anytime the pamphlets or any kind of propaganda crosses over the borders and they watch these American movies, South Korean movies, and on the North Korean peninsula, they look and they see how people are happy and free, and they want that. And that's what creates resistance to authoritarianism and wanting better life for themselves. So this is why 2020 and the upcoming elections for Canada still has some hope. If People Party of Canada wins, if Maxime wins, then we're going to have our own Trump kind of era here in Canada, and maybe we will start taking the fight forward. But if we lose, Trump is our last bastion, our last hope. And if we continue to get another 10 years or 8 years of socialism and Bernie's and Cortez and Hillary's, and they're just going to bring the authoritarian stick down on all of us, and it's not going to go well. And I think they're going to push us to a civil war. Whereas, we can, and it's a lot easier to spin it if we get into a civil war, right? It's a lot easier to spin the propaganda. But, if we sit here and lead by example over in America, then we can be that beacon of freedom to the rest of the globe and push everyone towards freedom. And that's why this fight is so important right now.
Yeah. And actually, one of the last areas that I want to talk about in regards to smart contracts was, and libertarians will love this one, roads or infrastructure projects, right? Because we all have heard this bullshit from statuses. What about my roads, man? We need big government for my roads, right? Well, maybe 100 years ago, because of the eminent domain, that was the biggest argument, the only genuine, legitimate argument that people had historically, and why they required, the monopoly of force or violence, the big gigantic gun in the room, as a means to impose their will on everyone else, is if you want to create infrastructure programs such as highways, right? And the highway or railways, right, or subways, or kind of these infrastructure programs that most of the people actually end up relying on at some point in time. But eminent domain was the biggest cause and concern for people in the past because, oh, it's a restriction on people's private property rights if the government goes in and uses eminent domain to create a highway. But today, that's the thing. In all of our Western developed countries, especially in Canada, we already have, we don't have to worry about the eminent domain arguments anymore because, well, if you know, whether I'm in Ontario, the 401, the 407, the 410, the 400, the blah, 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 400 series everywhere, right? Or Kingston Road, or lots of places. There's already lots of highways and roadways where we can find ways to travel all around this entire country or entire provinces. All we have to do is advance and modernize that particular infrastructure. So eminent domain is not even something that we need to concern ourselves today. 100 years ago was very important. But even today, I would say if you're going to take over, try to assume, or run rickshaw over a private property owner, well, the onus is on you to offer them, you know, voluntarily, so that they're doing it voluntarily, where you're not imposing anything on them, is offer them and compensate them enough to give them the proper incentive to say, okay, you know what? Yeah, this is a good place for a pipeline or a highway. I'm that one last holdout that's preventing this from happening for this infrastructure. And I'm not even saying to eliminate the rights of that individual, because as a person that respects individual rights and freedoms and liberty and property rights, I'm saying, no, we shouldn't allow government use eminent domain to deny this person their property rights. But at the very least, we should have people that are willing to negotiate, because everybody, even that one last holdout, chances are, if you give them a much better sales tactic or give them the option where, hey, you can do this instead, and we're going to compensate you and reward you properly because we recognize that your value, your property has a lot of value, and we're going to reward you for such. But at the same time, you're going to recognize that if you do the right thing and allow your property so you can create some kind of infrastructure, well, you can be properly compensated or rewarded. And that's the thing. That one holdout, let's say that's a private property owner, maybe if you want to create some kind of highway infrastructure program and you need their property to do so, you know, if the eminent domain, the fact that, you know, there's already public infrastructure in place, so you wouldn't need to worry about it. But if you do need to override or try to figure out a way to circumvent or get around this person owning this property, then reward them, compensate them. Say, hey, if you allow us or afford us the ability to use your property, you can gain some kind of monetary or economic compensation as a result. So, yes, people always say, oh, but there might be that one holdout. Well, listen, like I say, if that's your only concern, right? If you're literally worried about that one last holdout that might try to screw over entire countries or entire civilizations or entire infrastructure projects for the sake of just being an asshole, if you think we can't figure out a way to get around that, that just tells me that you don't understand how innovative and how creative the human mind can truly be. We'll figure it a way. There was lots of things that prevented us from traveling outside of our atmosphere and traveling to a completely different celestial sphere, such as the moon or Mars. But we've done it. We've overcome those obstacles. We've overcome those barriers. Don't have to worry about the fact that we need government or top-down authoritarianism to overcome something that I consider quite minute in nature. So enough with the goddamn bullshit as far as we need big government for our roads or bridges or any kind of infrastructure programs. It can happen, folks. It just requires some compensation and some cooperation. That's basically all you really need.
Yeah, well, I mean, just look at the automotive. I mean, the car has gotten progressively better and better and better, and the technology's improved in it. But yet the thing that the car drives on the road has remained the same as ancient Roman roads from thousands of years ago. But here's the ultimate question I'll pose to you. Did you ever see roads in Star Trek? I think there was roads in Star Trek. So even in Star Trek, though, it's funny, and they got all this technology, replicators, you know, beam me up, Scotty, but I think I've seen a couple roads. So I don't know. It's a pretty complex thing that even Star Trek couldn't understand what we're going to do besides roads.
At warp speed, hyperdrives, replicators, but damn them flat things, right? Oh, they're just too hard to overcome. That flat surface to drive on. How can we ever overcome that obstacle?
And it's inefficient too. If you got to move over a surface, that means, you know, water, you know, land that goes up and down, mountains. There's things that get in the way of that. So obviously the sciences, if they tackle the problem of getting around, it's clearly better to move through the air because there's less forms of resistance. You know, it's easier to travel through the air, but, you know, maybe teleportation is the solution.
Yeah, actually, I want to before. That's the thing. We're getting a little bit. We're getting close to the point where we'll probably soon start to try to tie it up. But there was a few other areas I wanted to cover, and this is something that's really important because I watched it. Like I said, I watched a few videos in regards to people that really understand and have a good grasp on smart technology and these smart contracts. So even things that you normally right now you'd rely on having some like a bank, right? Some kind of centralized institution as the intermediary or arbiter in some kind of these purchases, these large or small purchases, because it'll work, like I say, scalable on small scale or large scale, doesn't matter. But let's say you even want to buy a car. Nowadays, you could use, like I say, smart contracts, and rather than rely on a bank or some used car salesman, well, because the blockchain, like I say, because it has the ability to keep that ledger in place and maintain that can't be misconstrued or misrepresented or reconstructed in any way, that means when you create this smart contract or this purchase, you can hold, like I say, the purchaser or the seller to account based on that contract. And it's not just the fact that you sign the contract and they sign the contract, but because everyone along that blockchain ledger seen that contract, acknowledge that contract, and recognize that that contract exists. So, if you went to buy a house or a car, rather than going through a real estate agency or a banking institution, like I say, you can use smart technologies and some now they have crowdfunding sources now where you don't even have to go to banks. There's credit unions. There's all kinds of areas now with people with a lot of money, investors, institutional investors with a lot of money that can put a backstop and will do so, because historically nobody like let's say I was some rich investor and I was looking at a means to get some return on my investment. Normally I'd have to turn to the stock market or the bond market, because or something that has a bank or a government institution as the intermediary, because at least they have the ability to hold every actor to account, right? Nowadays with blockchain technology, now I can start to invest all different areas, because that blockchain now allows me to hold every individual actor to account, because that blockchain and that ledger technology allows me to do so. So now I don't have to use an intermediary. Now I can rely on not just a banker to confirm and decide as, oh, should I give credit to this person that's buying a house? Now I can know with 100% fact and certainty based on the ledger that this person is a respectable member of the community or of society. And they do have, obviously, that's the thing. If I would look is, let's say that they were afforded or granted some loan by some third-party intermediary. All I'd have to look on the blockchain technology and see, oh, look, that has been done. That's the money is there. Now it's just a matter of transferred into my account from theirs. And because not only do I see the transaction taking place and the original recipient or the owner of the home gets to see the transaction, now that we all get to see that transaction taking place, now we can hold each other to account. And this person doesn't hold up their side of the bargain or that side of the contract and no longer pays. Well, then I can hold them to account. And I don't have to just rely on my contract like, oh, shit. Oh, do I still have my paperwork? Oh, that's right, too. Even if I lost my copy, although you can't in the digital sphere, you can't lose it. It's there for all time, right? You can't burn it up. It's not going anywhere. It's going to be there for all time. But like I said, even if there's some pretense that you're worried that you might lose your copy of it, everybody else a copy of it. Well, so we can hold each other to account on small purchases and big purchases. So today, there's no longer even an excuse to have to use an intermediary for all of your transactions. Like I say, whether it's going out there today to buy a small purchase, something that's 10, 50, 100 bucks, or to purchase a car or to purchase a home. We can now have the ability to hold each other to account, make sure that nobody's trying to mess with each other. Nobody's going to have someone that's taking advantage of them to the tune of, tens or hundreds of thousands or maybe millions of dollars at the end of the day. Blockchain technology is afforded and given us the ability to hold each other in every aspect of the transaction to account. So what the hell do we need bankers for?
Yeah, I don't know. My mind is just in the gutter. I'm just thinking of funny things and stuff. So I don't
go
know.
for it. No, Matt, because we're tell you the truth, we're getting actually like close to the end of this. So if you just want to just go on pure, let's just fucking have a pile of fun.
I don't know. Just wondering what we do if we get invaded by interdimensional gay frogs from the planet Atrazine, what we would do to defend against that, as a decentralized army.
I'm telling you, caught me off guard on that one. I'm just not quite sure how we handle that situation. Do you got any way that you would deal with it personally?
No, I don't know. We might have to get Hillary Clinton into maybe a floating board head, maybe, and send her up with the Borg, maybe to defend against us. I'm not real sure.
Yeah, actually, that's actually the one thing. Now that you brought up Borg, I love, or I love it, hate, I guess, at the same time when people talk about Star Trek as if it's some communist fucking dystopian thing. Listen, just because they don't have currency in Star Trek, if you are a fan of Star Trek, it's all about respecting individual rights and freedoms and promoting, freedom. And it's a goddamn American fucking movie. It's American, not just movie, but a series. They were not about collectivism. That the Borg was the opposite, right? The Borg was the collective mindset, whereas the Enterprise, the starship, and the fact that the whole Star Trek Enterprise was based on the fact of the Republic, right? The respect of the individual, not collectivism. They fought collectivism, but I hear a lot of people always talk and say, yeah, but because there's no cash in some future dystopian part as far as Star Trek, well, it doesn't mean that they still don't reward and compensate each other for what they add or attribute to people. Like I say, there's a totally different variable that you can use as far as compensating people just in the future. I guess at that particular junction in this dystopian or not dystopian, but this science fiction endeavor that they presented is they just use a different measure of value in how they reward and compensate each other. And I'm not even against that. All I'm against is collectivization, is this top-down authoritarianism where you just force or impose your will on people. If we have such thing, put it this way, if there's such thing in real life, real tangible life, where there's such thing as a replicator, where there's no such thing, because a replicator basically acknowledges there's no shortages anymore. A replicator suggests that we don't have to worry about there's going to be a shortage or a finite amount of resources that we got to rely or depend upon. A replicator suggests that you can have it forever and all of eternity, keep reproducing and replicate. So it means there is no shortage. There is no finite resources. So we're not going to have to think in the capitalist or the proper mindset if there's like an infinite ability to reproduce or replicate the things that we need or require to sustain our livelihoods. When we get to that point, if and when we ever get to the point where we have replicators that can reproduce things without any variable or any human input whatsoever, then I guess, we might start at that point in time talking about maybe we should start changing or affecting how we measure or value things in the tangible world. But like I say, until that point comes, we still have to function in the real world. And in the real world, we are living on a sphere that has a finite amount of resources contained within the sphere. And value means that we place a measure of that in regards to how people use that to benefit, whether it's themselves or society or large communities or the globe at large. That measure, that pretension of value is always going to, at this point in time, as long as there's a finite amount of resources, is always going to rely on market-driven forces and our natural incentives and how much importance we pose or put forth in regards to the things that we use or consume.
Yeah. I don't know. Just off the cuff too.
Yeah, that wasn't very fun. Yeah, I know. I get too fucking serious about it.
No. Maybe next podcast we'll do just a funny, silly one about, because that's I know where you're coming.
And we should just go on like a total free for all. Because tell you the truth, hey, if you're watching this video, folks, when me and Matt are just talking in a free for all, probably the best fucking conversation you'll ever hear, to be honest with you. When we try to do this constructive things, I think it's working out pretty decent. I think we're doing a pretty good job of covering the most important parts of these kind of topics and things that we discuss. But yeah, the free flow is definitely, I think it's much more fun for the most part. But we're just trying out, see how it works, see what, and I'm definitely relying on those of you that are watching this. Give us some feedback. Tell me, what would you like to see? What would you like to hear? What's the best way we should go forward? And I'll take a lot of your feedback into account, because at the end of the day, it's not about me. It's not about Matt. It's about getting a whole lot of people engaged and talk about and discussing the kind of things that we want to talk about, so that we can, create an area where the people feel that they can congregate to and have the ability to say and discuss the thing that's on their mind without feeling that they're going to be silenced or suppressed by people that are ideologically driven. I'm not. My son's not. Say what you got to say. Like I said, or even with my discussion with Matt Sands yesterday, communists, socialists, fascists, even collectivists. Hey, if you want, be more than willing to join in these conversations. Join us in a debate. Join us in a conversation. We'll allow you actually to join in and say what you got to say. I want to hear what you got to say. I'm not the kind of person that just closes my eyes or plugs my ears and pretends that my way, it's got to be my way or the highway. I recognize the only way I'm going to be able to live at least remotely freely in the world is if I let other people do their thing and they allow me to do my thing. Matt, my son, as long as he gets to live his life the way he wants to do it, as long as he's not causing harm or imposing his mandates or edicts on others, as long as I'm doing the same thing. Hey, you socialists, you collectivists, you do your thing. You just don't get to force your shit on me. That's all we're about at the end of the day, is just allowing each other to have our own social or economic experiments, and don't try to use some kind of authoritarianism or the big gigantic gun in the room to impose your wills, your mandates, or your edicts on, or your preferences on me. Let's have a big experiment. You do your thing, I'll do my thing, Matt will do his thing, and we'll see how it's most beneficial. And if what Matt does is most beneficial to him, what I do is most beneficial to you, what you do is most beneficial to you, at the end of the day, we're all happy. We all received a net benefit at the end of the day, and we're not going to be disgruntled and always looking at each other as if we're trying to impose her. Because that's really, at the end of the day, we're looking at, because government seeks to use monopoly of force of violence to impose their will on each other. Well, like I say, socialists, fascists, collectivists, individualists, people who are advocates of just pure individualism or those kind of fundamental rights and freedoms, we're always going to be at loggerheads and butting heads against each other, because it's like we're constantly trying to impose our shit on each other on a continuing, ongoing basis. If we could get to the point where you just do your thing, I do my thing, and just let the free market unfold, and we'll see how well your particular endeavor works out. We'll see how well my particular endeavor works out. And like I say, let people vote based on what they think is more preferential or beneficial to them as the individual. That's the best way to do things going forward, folks.
Yeah, let us know going ahead if you want us to always be serious or have some fun episodes. I know me personally, I like to have some fun, because tuning in the news cycle every single day, reading all the headlines can be very depressing, can make you feel like you're put down at times. So every once in a while, I do like to go off the radar and talk about, potential futuristic utopias, tackling big questions like, are we alone in the universe? Talk about aliens, talk about future technologies, talk about AI, all that kind of stuff. Because, yeah, they may be conversations that are fun right now, but are probably a realistic scenario here, not too far off. These are things that are actually going to come to fruition, I believe, in my lifetime. I'm not quite 30 years old yet, so I can just imagine in the last 100 years, we've went from, if you were to go to 1919 to 2019, and just that span of 100 years, I mean, you look at basically horse and buggy and carriage and, modern basic technologies to where we are now, where we are populating the stars with robots and satellites and visiting other planets. So, I could just imagine what I'm going to see in the next span of my lifetime. I may see these big questions being posed nowadays in the sciences actually coming to fruition in reality in my lifetime. So, let us know in the comment section below. Do you always want it to be straight about politics, or do you want us to go off the cuff a couple episodes and just have those off the cuff conversations about random things and about fun stuff? Because I know I love to have those conversations.
Yeah, no, that's true. Actually, yeah, we probably should try to lighten it up from time to time, and that is something that's important. Anyways, let me just check the timing. I don't know why it's weird. I was looking a little bit earlier. Let me just take another look again. I don't know if it's because of the way I should have never done that, I guess. But I'm seeing that there's not a whole lot of comments. Well, I seen Gato's in there.
Here's another question for you, though, a random one. So, the Blackbird, SR-71 Blackbird.
Yep.
Flying in the 1960s, looked like something out of a Star Trek / X-Men movie. I think the X-Men plane actually looks similar to the SR-71 Blackbird. So they had that thing back in the 60s. So just close your eyes and ponder what you think they must have now. We don't really hear of the advanced technologies that the government has. All these black black book projects. And that's why I like to speculate on, because there's trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars out of our military budgets each year that goes into these black book budgets and these underground bases. And you know they have them. You know, when you talk about things like advanced technologies, underground bases, laser beam guns, and all this kind of stuff, people think, oh, conspiracy theory. Well, you can leave right now from this episode and just Google CIA, what is it called? CIA heart attack gun, I think is what they called it, from the 1960s. And they had a congressional hearing in front of Congress talking about how the CIA had a gun that would fire a ice dart that would go into your skin but melt because it's made of ice, would implant a poison inside of you that the coroner would not be able to find in your bloodstream, but would give you a heart attack and make it look like you had a heart attack. And then I start posing the question, you know, Seth Rich, what's the other guy there? Andrew Breitbart died of a heart attack. You know, you start thinking of these crazy things where you do get down the conspiracy wheel, but we do know the elite, the people in power, are. I believe they're not. I believe they'd kill people to keep that power in place. So, you know, and I mean, just start Googling Andrew Breitbart and some of the tweets that guy put out back in like the early 2090s. Like, man, he was woke for his time. He was saying things about the Podestas and Hillary Clinton all back then. And like, I even believe you can find one of his tweets before he died, maybe a week before he died, basically saying that, you know, I'm worried that I'm going to be killed, maybe a fake heart attack. And then the guy dies. And then what was it? Was his name Seth Rich, the guy who drove his car way too fast down the highway, smashed into a telephone pole, and killed himself a couple of days before he was about to drop a bunch of info on the Obama administration? You know, I mean, just look at Edward Snowden and Chelsea Manning. Chelsea Manning, she brings out videos showing that the government's just mowing down with Apache helicopters innocent civilians and journalists over in the Middle East. That's what she's in jail for. She refuses to testify against WikiLeaks. I mean, the resolve of Chelsea Manning, oh my God, everyone bowed down. After being imprisoned in solitary confinement, stripped down, tortured, left to her mind in a cell for 23 hours a day, gets released by the Obama administration early, is told, hey, you better testify against WikiLeaks and give us the inside scoop on that or you're going back. And she refuses and goes right back to that torture. My God, what hats off to people like that, or Edward Snowden. Those are the people who really won't be appreciated till years down the road. Chelsea Manning, you will be a Martin Luther King. You will be a Gandhi back in the history books to willing to go back to the torture that you went through just because you don't roll over on your WikiLeaks people.
Well, you know, that's actually the biggest problem I have with people that predominantly seem to come from the right wing of the political spectrum post the Edward Snowden revelations. And these are people, like I say, most people from the right side of that political spectrum would be all about, you know, law enforcement, police, security, right? Military. and they seem to be more than willing to defend the Five Eyes program or try to put forth any kind of narrative that suggests that we should have governments that has some kind of carte blanche ability to invade on our personal individual privacies or the kinds of things that we put forth out there on the social media sphere. Edward Snowden proved to us, and what was it, James? Fuck, I can't remember that guy's name now. It's been so long now. And that's the thing, actually. Most Canadians, not just Canadians, Americans. What's that?
Is that the guy from Google, James?
No, not James Damore. Okay. The guy that admitted that, yeah, collect it all. Just put collect it all and then type in James. I think it's Coney. Anyways, one of the fucking bigwigs there that basically admitted they're under testimony because he had to tell the truth, right? He was under oath, was basically they have a program it's all about collect it all. Collect it all. So basically he admitted after the Snowden revelations, he had to admit during his sworn testimony that the U.S. government basically collects everything that you do in the digital sphere. And it's not just the U.S., it's the Five Eyes. So it's the United States, Canada, the U.K., Australia, and New Zealand. So the Western allies, as they call it, the Five Eyes. Now, I get that as far as like if you're trying to worry about foreign actors or foreign interveners or foreign adversaries, right? In regards to cyber warfare or even information or propaganda type initiatives. The problem is it should always be reliant on worrying about opponents or those outside of the borders or the boundaries of Western societies. But they're using this kind of top-down authoritarianism of collecting everything that we do on the internet or in any digital sphere. They're collecting everything that we do. Now, I don't think any government should ever have any pretense of authority to collect everything that I do on a digital sphere, on the social media, or on the internet. Sorry, getting a little bit of a frog in my throat there. But the fact that they have the ability to retain and possess everything that I've ever done digitally, now I don't care because I hold myself to a fairly high standard. So I don't think there's ever going to be anything they'll be able to use at any point in time in the future against me. But I do recognize there are probably millions of people, and even if they weren't serious, but people that have probably said things that are probably not just controversial, but may now, under this new pretense of political correctness, be deemed not just unethical, immoral, but illegal. That now government will use just the words or the things they espouse as a means to use against them because they have this collected and stored in their servers in the big government cloud, right? So at some point in time, like I say, I'm not worried about myself today. I'm not worried about even my son today. But at some point in time in the future, the fact that all of these governments have the ability to collect and snoop on everything that we do in the social media sphere or online, it allows some point in time in the future. I'm not necessarily worried about Trump, but at some point in time in the future, there might be some authoritarian piece of shit that comes to power that wants to use all that information that's now at their disposal and readily available to use against us. I mean, think about it, if you were the Hitlers or the Mussolinis or the Maos or the Stalins or the Lenins of the past, where you didn't just have to rely on, your mindless order followers or your lackeys to tell you who were the bad people who were standing up in opposition to communism or top-down authoritarianism. Back then, like, that was a Herculean task that could not be done seamlessly, right? Now, with information technology and the ability of these big, gigantic algorithms or computer systems to collect, store, and retain everything that we've said, now these big authoritarian governments have all that at their disposal that they can use against us at any point in time in the future. That, to me, that's devastating and very destructive, not just to our privacy rights, but to any of our potential to hold power to account at some point in time in the future. So we definitely got to get to decentralization and use the age of information and these blockchain or these technologies to circumvent or prevent top-down authoritarianism or governments from not just collecting and snooping on what we do, but using it against us at some point in time in the future to silence or suppress us, especially those of us who are standing up in opposition to a big top-down government or authoritarianism, because those are the people that they're always going to go after first. Just like I say, just under the Nazi days or the communist days, they always go after the people that are standing in opposition to those who are putting forth their ideologies and how they want to impose that on their subjects or their serfs in any particular country. We have to maintain and retain our ability to not just have our own privacy protected, but have their ability to push back against those who try to rule over us at some point in time, and have the ability to push back against them without them being able to restrict us in any way, because that's the only thing that we have. Like I say, we don't have our words. If we don't have our ability to hold power to account, the only thing that we have left is either succumbing to their whims, their edicts, and conformity, or resorting to violent opposition or revolutions. And trust me, folks, I recognize that most people today, especially baby boomers on down, none of you fuckers have ever been in any civil or major world wars or conflicts, so you don't even know and understand what that could possibly unfold or how that will entail going forward. So you don't want to ever get to the point where we have to get into actual violent conflicts. Let's use our brains, let's use our words, let's use information to battle against these top-down authoritarianism, so we never have to get to that point where we actually have to go toe-to-toe or blow for blow.
Well, I truly believe, too, that we're in a civil war currently. When we read through history books, civil wars, we always read the moment of the first shot was fired and then the physical altercations begin, but nobody ever talks about what led up to that. There was always the years and years and years of buildup, the erosion of the rights, everything that happened up until that. Same with Hitler. Hitler didn't come to power overnight and just start invading countries. It took time, propaganda, and stifling of freedoms, and and ratcheting down on journalism and all that stuff that we're living for today. I think we're currently in the Civil War. We're not at the aspect yet of physical violence, in some situations we are when it comes to Antifa and stuff like that, and violence spilling out in the streets with these riots. But we're definitely in a current civil war. And I'd also say to people too, you need to understand the people who run the government, the people who pull the strings, these are the same type of people back in the 1950s, 60s, you know, when they come up with the atomic bomb. At the time, you can even research the Manhattan Project. They didn't know whether or not the bomb was going to blow a hole in our atmosphere at the time, because it's just the first time they blew it up, right? They didn't know. And you know what? They're like, well, if we're right and it doesn't, the power we gain from this technology, we can dominate the world with it. We can drop it on Japan. We can bring wars to an end. So your government, the people that you guys worship, you know, anyone who worships government or thinks that government regulations or government intervention is a good idea, these same people were like, all right, fuck it. Blow it up. If it blows up the atmosphere and kills us all, who cares, right? We're going to get this technology. These are the same type of people who MK Ultra declassified. You know, they wanted to understand if we have an enemy combatant and we capture him and we want to, and you know, this is good military strategy. You want to learn the secrets, right? You want to get out of this guy. How many guys do you got over there? What kind of technology do you got? You want him to spill his information that could give you an advantage in that war. Well, what did they do? They're like, well, how can we get people to talk, right? They wanted a truth serum. So they used LSD, they used drugs, they used torture tactics, they used sleep deprivation, they used, you know, different ways to break down the psychology of a mind, to shatter it, to shatter a human being, to understand how the human brain works, to find out best ways to make them be truthful. They also experimented and wanted to answer the question, if we can actually get an enemy combatant to reveal his secrets, how can we also erase his memory, send him back to his foes and friends, and not spill what we've done to him and our secrets? So they also experimented, how can we wipe the human brain? How can we traumatize a person to a certain point that they have memory loss? And your government did all this in doctors' coats and doctors' lab coats, torturing people to figure out how they can control the masses. This is what your government did, you know. They blew up bombs not knowing if it was going to blow up the atmosphere. They tortured and killed people. They used brain control, mind control techniques. They infected a bunch of people with syphilis. They've infected people with other vaccines and damaging diseases through vaccines to determine, maybe we can find a cure. But in order to find a cure, we might have to kill some people leading up to finding that cure. And they were okay with all of it, all the experiments done. You know, just look at Guantanamo and how we've treated our prisoners of war. So, you know, this is your government. This is why you do not give people power, because this is what it leads to.
Yeah. As with all times throughout all of history, advancements in technology have always helped and create a more conducive society that can hold those in positions of power or authority to account. So let's think about the original conception or inception of the gun. At the very early inception or conception of creating the gun and bringing that to fruition or to reality, there would have only been a very finite or small group or band of people. Chances are at that time, those were in position of authority themselves that had possession of the gun to use against everyone else. Modern advancements in technology and how that flourishes and how that unfolds has now created a scenario where everybody has access to that gun that at one point in time, like I say, only the most elitist, only the very small group of people ever had access to. Same with in the information age today. Historically, it was only those that were the aristocrats, the central planners, the intellectual class, right? Those who tried to impose their own pretenses of their sense of morality or ethics on the people. Now, the information age, just like, you know, the age of the gun, we now have access that we can use the same tools at their disposal. We now have access to them to ourselves as an individual, as even just a lowly serf, as a lowly subject, as just a typical human being. You now have access to the things that the central planners once used against you. Now you have access to them as well. So now there is no monopoly, right? Not in the information age. Governments no longer have the monopoly of force or violence, and they no longer have the monopoly of information or the spread of that kind of information. This is where the disruptive nature of modern technology of the information age is giving us all, each and every one of us, even the lowly individual, all the way down to just your, you know, I think some of the folks that I grew up with back in New Brunswick, you know, that in the grand scheme of things, didn't have a lot of power historically, would have never had their voice even acknowledged or recognized. But today, because of the age of information, because of social media platforms, and hey, let me mention Dissenter, dissenter.com, brought to you by Gab. So that's another thing. Gab has actually given us another tool, another weapon in our arsenal that we can use against central planners or these centralized authoritarians that try to impose their mandates and the way you're supposed to think on us. That Dissenter allows you, now you can comment anywhere on the internet. So you don't have a lot of these social media places, they try to silence or suppress your voice by denying your ability to comment on their platforms unless you join up to them. Well, Dissenter, like I say, brought to you by gab.com. Now you can say what you got to say on any platform, and they can't delete or deny your ability to say what you got to say. So like I say, modern advancements in technology is giving us all the tools at our disposal, and another weapon in our arsenal that we can use against people that used to be the only ones that had the monopoly of those tools. Now it's all in the hands of each and every one of us. Now, rather than what I'm trying to talk about today in the age of information, rather than using and focusing our weapons that are now at our disposal, rather than using it to point at each other, let's adopt that live, let live mentality. Let's adopt some very small, finite rules of universality where we should respect each other for our sovereignty, for our individuality, and focus and intention all the tools, all the weapons in our arsenal against those who've tried to monopolize that ability or used to have the monopoly on those tools or those weapons in the past. We all have access to them now. So nobody should ever have the pretense that they can force or impose their ideas on us, because even you or I, every one of us now can push back against them, and they don't have any of the pretense to silence or suppress us. We have the ability. Like I said, folks, in the age of information, ignorance is not only a choice, but also in the age of information, because intellectual information and knowledge is so powerful. You have access to the most powerful weapon on the planet, and it's about time that you use it in a constructive and a productive manner and focus it on the people that are trying to impose themselves on you. If you do that, the future is bright, and the respect of the individual and the respect for each other and the flourishment of cooperation, not just in social spheres as far as small scale in your community or in your state or in your province or in your country, but even on the global stage. Once we have the ability to hold each other to account and actually push back against each other properly, and we have the ability and the capacity to do so, well, we'll treat each other with a lot more respect as a result and as a consequence.
All right, in closing, I'm going to read off a poem. First, I'll ask you, Dad, have you ever heard the poem Paul Harvey, If I Were the Devil? He wrote it in 1965. You heard it?
Yeah, go for it. No, that was a great one. Go for it.
Yeah? Okay, I'll read this. And you think? This guy wrote this in 1965.
Yep, I remember.
How relevant it is today. So let me read it out for you guys. If I were the devil, I would gain control of the most powerful nation in the world. I would delude their minds into thinking that they had come for man's effort instead of God's blessings. I would promote an attitude of loving things and using people instead of the other way around. I would dupe an entire states into relying on gambling for their state revenue. I would convince people that character is not an issue when it comes to leadership. I would make it legal to take the life of unborn babies. I would make society acceptable to take one's own life and invent machines to make it convenient. I would cheapen human life as much as possible so that the life of an animal are valued more than human beings. I would take God out of schools, where even the mention of his name is grounds for a lawsuit. I would come up with drugs to sedate the mind and target the youth. I would get sports heroes to advertise them. I would get control of the media so that every night I could pollute the mind of every family member for my agenda. I would attack the family, the backbone of any nation. I would make divorce acceptable and easy and fashionable. If the family crumbles, so does a nation. I would compel people to express their most depraved fantasies on a canvas of movie screens, and I would call it art. I would convince the world that people are born homosexuals and that their lifestyles should be accepted and marveled. I would convince people that the right and wrong are determined by a few who call themselves authorities rather than to their agenda as politically correct. I'd pursue people that the church is irrelevant and out of date, and and the Bible is for the naive. I would dull the minds of Christians and make them believe prayer is not important, that faithfulness and obedience are optional. I would guess I would leave things the way they are. And how true that is to today. And that's what the people who run the society are doing. It's destroying the state of our mind. It's destroying the value of family. It's destroying the value of men. And I've talked about this in a previous podcast that we did. You know, if I was a ruling class and I look down at the planet, I see which is my number one enemy, which will be the first form of resistance, who will pick up arms, who will physically resist me in the street from ruling over these people. Well, it's predominantly going to be white men. And that's why you see white men being the number one target in the political spectrum, the number one target when it comes to political talk. We are seen as the devil. We are being attacked at all perspectives. And that's what this is. This is a big game of 4D chess. It's destroy the family, promote abortion, promote suicide, you know, and some of these things are libertarian values. Like, you know, I'm of a libertarian. So if you want to kill yourself, to each his own, right? But the deep staters, the one who pull the strings, are going to take advantage of that principle of mine and use it to exploit, to kill, the same way they do with people on the left. Oh, pro-abortion, pro-choice. But for them, it's let's get in there, because the more people we can kill, that's the least resistance. That's less soldiers coming out of the wombs of women, right? One person said that as a quote as well. So you got to understand where all this comes from. All of it. The gay people are being used. White people are being used. Other nations and races are being used. We're all being used to pin off against each other, to fight amongst each other, to stir up all this division. Because if we're all talking about inner fighting and inner combats, and you know we're all fighting each other, we're not fighting the ruling class, the people that are truly keeping us at bay.
Well said, Matt. Well said. And that's at the end of the day, whether, like I say, whether it's those of us that are alive today or the potential unborn. It's respecting the sovereignty of the individual and of life itself is what matters at the end of the day. We can disagree with each other fundamentally on a lot of areas and a lot of aspects and how that unfolds as it pertains to how our social or economic life pertains over the course of our entire life or in our entire existence. But at the very least, we must maintain and retain some very core fundamentals or aspect of what it is even to be a modern human being, which is to respect the sovereignty and the rights and the autonomy of the individual, and for them to have the ability to live their life how they see fit. As long as they're not imposing, you know, their wills on other people, allow people to experiment in their own lives the way they want to. Like I say, I don't agree with everyone, like, you know, people in this LGBT community. I think a lot of them may at some point in time in the future probably come to the point where they recognize that it was probably quite devastating to their own psychology, but there was things that caused them to get to that point. And I'm not anyone that should ever pretend or know the psychology or what resides in their head. So I should never pretend that I should be able to tell them how they should go forward and deal with their own personal social situation or economic situation for that matter. What I want, though, is allow and afford them the ability to educate and inform themselves enough that they can make more constructive or better decisions for their own personal life. They'll hopefully not better them, but it will also better the people in their community, in their immediate community or their extended family or the greater society at large. Allowing people to figure it on their own and to have proper information at their disposal where they can figure out things that's more conducive with allowing them to think about things critically enough that, yeah, okay, I have a different way I want to do things, but hey, I can't ever suggest or pretend that my way is the highway. Other people might want to do things differently. And maybe I can learn and adopt some of their best practices if I see that that's how it unfolds. Like I say, I don't ever want to try to suggest or pretend that I know how other people should live their lives. I want them to do the best they can do for their own lives that gives them genuine meaning and happiness. But at the same time, I want them to also have that live, let live mentality where they'll reciprocate and give me that same respect in kind. And really, at the end of the day, that's all that really matters is we don't have to, that's the problem with government. It's always about whether it's the liberals, the conservatives. Why do we think that we should impose our ideas on everyone in society? That's what government does. So whether it's the conservatives come to power, the liberals come to power, or the endeavors come to power, it's this overarching umbrella or pretense that one ideology should now, because they've gained this pretense of authority, they should now impose their ideas on everyone else. No. That's why I reject politics for the most part. I mean, I'll vote as a pragmatic approach to deny people their ability to do social or economic slavery. I call it a defensive mechanism. That's all I'm voting for. I don't think that's the end all be all, but I think people should at least have the ability and the capacity to do what's right for them, because I think if people are happy in their own personal lives, in their own personal skin, I think that's beneficial to the rest of us in society. So I want you to do what's best for you, but I don't want you ever to have the capacity to use that big, gigantic gun in the room to impose what you think is best for you and pretend that you know what's best for me. I'll let you do your thing. You let me do my thing. And at the end of the day, I think we're all going to benefit as a consequence, as a result of that. But thanks, Matt, for having this again. This is our third one, folks. Like I say, really nice to see that we've got this now with third one in a row. Third time's a charm. Haven't had any technical issues or glitches. I will give Matt a chance to say just a few things before I tie this up, but this is another, like I say, great discussion. And maybe the next time we will just go total free for all and just say what we've got to say, and maybe just start to deal with those of you that do want to engage with us in the chat section, because I know I've been a little bit bad, naughty boy, because I'm not really, like I say, old dog trying to learn some new tricks. But next time we'll try to do that so that we're actually allowing you to engage properly and making this more of a fluid conversation as well.
And I would just say in closing that if interdimensional gay frogs from the planet Atrazine show up in our atmosphere, do not bare your ass to them. Rise up and fight them and convert them to Pepe memes to spread freedom.
Right on, Matt. All right, everyone. Like I say, thanks again. We'll see you next Sunday. We're going to have another discussion. Like I say, I'll figure the topic between now and then, but chances are it's probably, like Matt suggested or alluded to, it's probably just going to be more or less a free-for-all where we're just going to be more or less concentrating on what you got to say as feedback or those in the chat section and see how that all plays out. I think that actually might be quite fun, to tell you the truth. So we'll see you next Sunday. And make sure you join us. Don't forget about us, folks. We'll be there, and we'll be there every weekend from this weekend going forward, because that's what we're all about today, folks, is we're trying to educate and inform you and make it more engaging, enlightenment, and entertaining at the same time. Talk to you later. Have a good one.